Welcome one and all to episode 17 of the Coast AFL Podcast with Nick and Players. This week, it's a short week, only 6 matches, so we're going to have maybe a little bit more in-depth on some of the games. On some of the other ones, maybe not so much because they weren't as interesting. But we shall see. There isn't really all that much else to talk about, so this could end up being a short episode. We will see how we go. So let's jump right into it. How are you doing, Mr. Cyric?
Yeah, I'm okay. I managed to watch at least bits of every game this week. But yeah, so that was nice. Probably could have been a bit more of an interesting week to have to watch every game, but still a fair few things to take out of it. Other than that, yeah, it's just a cold, starting to get cold in Perth, which is a rarity. And yeah,
Welcome to the winter.
pretty much it.
It's about time you guys
I know. Oh man, yeah. I mean, we kind of get it. It's just not really that bad, even at its worst.
Yeah, I know. It's like a Queensland winter. It's still it's like somewhat warm still.
Yeah, it's just not. It's never that windy unless you live on the coast, which is nice, but also makes me a bit softer.
Yeah, the ocean breeze is usually a bit chilling.
Yeah.
All right, shall we jump right into it then?
Yes.
I got the first game.
Yeah.
Brisbane and St Kilda at the Gabba. I don't think people were really expecting this to be as close in terms of score as it ended up being.
Yeah.
Because I mean, granted,
the type of score.
Yeah,
well.
Exactly. Because like Brisbane's history at the Gabba so far this season hasn't been great. St Kilda in general haven't been great.
Yeah.
But they, despite the fact that Brisbane had control pretty much the entire game, St Kilda put up a pretty valiant fight. Like only a 20-point deficit isn't a bad thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I actually a bit more negative on this performance than most people. As much as I think the Saints, I mean, look, it was nice seeing them score over 100 points. They haven't done it for a while. And, it did look at, I think Brisbane every day of the week will actually have this sort of game. Like Brisbane, they'll only really defend if they feel like you're worth defending in a sort of way.
True.
Like in this sort of game, in this sort of shootout, I think Brisbane just had the avenue of winning. And in terms of putting themselves in a position to win, while it was good for the Saints that they, had this sort of win, I just think in terms of likelihood of getting a victory, yeah, it wasn't that great. It was just, at least it was entertaining to watch.
Yeah, that's very true. But
get some form into some players as well.
The scoreline was 19-12, 126 to 16-10, 106. Again, only a 20-point deficit. Pretty much 3 goals in it. It was fairly close for the most part, at least in the end scoreline. In terms of the matchup itself, yeah, Brisbane pretty much had control the entire night. There's not sometimes when they're actually in form, like there's one of the pretty unstoppable teams.
Yeah, like as I said, they could have demolished the Saints. Like as I said, it's not like this. I'm not having a go at the Saints for playing badly or anything. It's just I don't think you're just going to win a game of footy against the Brisbane Lions playing like that.
No,
I'm not sure exactly what the Saints will take away out of it, but if this was just Ross Lyon trying to liven things up, try things, it wasn't the worst outcome ever. But yeah, as I said, in terms of the individual game itself, it's just as I said, if they come out next week and they're defensive and not really doing the same thing, I'll definitely question this week. But as I said, in terms of trying to generate forward momentum, getting their forwards into the games, you'll probably mention a little, probably close to your heart, Livewire had a really good game.
Debatable about being close to my heart, but he's definitely close to my height.
Yeah, okay. And I like it.
But that's not where I'm going to start. I'm going to start with Lachie Neale getting tagged, actually, because I believe Marcus Windhager had that job. And
flavor of the week, really.
Kept him pretty quiet. I mean, he still put up 20 plus touches, but
yeah,
he wasn't really the standout player for me in that game, and I think Hugh McCluggage actually took it for me. So
Oh yeah, exactly. It's he had a pretty big game. And there's a few others that could have, but yeah, in terms of the inside midfield, it wasn't exactly where Brisbane were getting a lot of their power from, which is a bit different from other games where they're dominant.
yeah, because normally it's Lockie Neal and normally it's Josh Dunkley, who often have the strong inside
or just
performances.
Well, as I said, it's just even last week, as I said, it's dominating the clearances and smashing them in terms of possession. But this one actually saw Brisbane dominate it via uncontested possession. I would say,
Yeah,
they just had a lot of control over the ball and could work it forward a lot better.
Absolutely. And Hugh McCluggage did a lot of that work.
Prime example of that.
26 touches at 80.8% efficiency, 8 contested possessions, 5 intercepts, 11 marks, 5 inside 50s, 3 clearances, 12 score involvements, 22 pressure acts, and he kicked 2 on himself. Pretty solid performance for himself.
Pretty great, yeah. Honestly, a lot of their players sort of had that sort of, Zorko as well, I think, was another one of those big... Okay.
So Zorko...
But yeah, just off that half-back line to wing, they had a pretty great game.
Their half-back line is probably one of the strongest in the league, I would imagine.
Not sure about strongest in the league, but definitely it's recovered since losing Coleman, I'll say.
Absolutely. Yeah, he was a massive key to their entire structure, and it really threw them for a loop when he did his ACL.
Yeah, and now it's coming together.
Yeah.
It might shape up to be, if this continues.
Yeah, especially if Zorko keeps putting up these insane performances.
Yeah, he's having a sort of I wouldn't even call it a comeback, but he's definitely playing a role where he's much more suited to as he's getting older.
And if it's going to prolong his career as well, I'm all for it. He's probably my favorite Brisbane player, I'm going to be honest.
I bet he's a bit cheeky. I'm not gonna lie. He's a bit of a hothead. Gives away a few dumb free kicks.
But, but everyone does that.
I'll go a bit more than usual, but I do like him.
Maybe
look, I'm not gonna lie. I love the goofiness of Joe Danaher.
Maybe it's just the halfback interceptors because Nick Vlastuin does the exact same thing.
Yeah, maybe. But yeah. Joe Danaher is probably my favorite line, but I can't deny the effort of what Zorko's doing at the moment.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. So his numbers were 30 touches at 76.7% efficiency, 10 contested possessions, 13 intercept possessions, 9 marks, 3 inside 50s, 9 score involvements, and 755 meters gained, which I think off the top of my head is the most meters gained across the round.
Yeah, it's at least off the match. I can quickly look that up for you.
I didn't actually check all of the games. I did check all of my ones, at least.
No, I can easily get it.
Pretty sure.
Not quite. He was 5th, actually.
Oh, well, top 5
there was a few late. So, I'll mention them when they come up. But, yeah.
Fair enough.
Pretty big. Yeah. 1 of 5 to get over 700.
Joe Danaher was also pretty accurate in front of goals, which is a rare occurrence this day.
Look, he was on early. You could tell this was just his night.
He needed a big night. I always struggled with consistency, and it's good that he's actually managed to get pretty accurate evening words.
Yeah, especially with Hipwood dropping off. He's really taken the charge of leading that forward line.
So, he finished with 5-1 from 20 touches, 8 contested possessions, 12 marks, and 8 score involvements. And pretty much just led from the front in terms of forward work. He didn't need someone like Charlie Cameron to get in there. Didn't need any of their other smalls to get in there. He just needed to mark and to be accurate, and he did.
Yeah,
because he had good carriers bringing it to him in the forward line.
Yeah, because I was going to say, by memory, I don't really remember the ball going to ground that much in that game. I felt it was either intercepted or marked
Well,
most of the time.
off the top of my head, it was like there was barely any wind. Like it wasn't wet or anything. It was literally just a straight shot sort of game.
Oh yeah, but there's a team that I supported with no wind on a perfect day that didn't
Oh, that's true.
have that great in front of the sticks. But yeah, as I said, yeah, I was overall scoring was brilliant in that game. I will say, um, you know, yeah, the defensive side of things, I think both coaches will probably want a few things caught up a bit. Probably especially St Kilda.
Oh, absolutely, St Kilda. They still have a lot of issues to deal with.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Okay, so Brisbane were 21 set shots and 9 goals from general play. So yeah, it didn't really hit the ground much at all for them. They were just dominating with set shots.
That's pretty good actually. That's a
Yeah,
rare occurrence in this sort of in the way the game is played now. It's pretty rare that set shots is a dominant statistic.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about. I'm just going to briefly mention a couple of St Kilda's standout players. Captain Jack Sinclair. I thought he had a really good game. 32 touches at 78.1% efficiency. 8 contested possessions. Too. Absolutely. 8 contested possessions.
Trying to go back in the middle 50s, a bit more.
4 clearances, 7 score involvements, 15 pressure acts, and 599 meters gained. He was pretty much running both ends all night. Yeah. Did a lot of hard work. Pretty much the only main notable one doing that through the midfield. Cal Wilkie, I thought was good off half back. He got 10 intercept possessions from 18 touches. 7 of those were contested intercept possessions.
Yeah, I would say a lot of work had to be done by the defenders in that game.
Absolutely.
Because they had a lot of concessions, which is again why I was a bit harsh on St Kilda. I think trying to prevent some of the inside 50 dominance, could have helped them.
But it also looks like that they didn't really have a lot of forward pressure. Like Brisbane did manage to go coast to coast a few times, which is
it was a lot of scoring off the defensive half. It's just I just thought there was a bit of difference, especially because St Kilda. It's weird because like before you'd have the go at them for playing like too slow or a boring style of football. But they do play on a lot, and they bring the ball forward a lot on the wings, but is just very predictable.
Yeah.
And it often falters before they get their entries in, which means if you do generate a lot of intercepts off halfback, the ball can come back again very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, as I said, it's just, it brings those smaller players up as well. You know what I mean? Like, when you're doing those dump kicks to that line, it means that you're setting up to do your attack from 60 meters out and all that.
Yeah, so, rather than from like 40, 30 meters where you really want your forwards to
exactly. If you don't vary up that attack, as I said, you're just forcing the tolls to present, which you do okay. I thought the St Kilda tolls for the night, but yeah, as I said. Just a bit predictable. As I said, I don't want to go too harshly on them because technically they are a bottom side. Facing Brisbane at the Gabba to get that close was pretty good. As I said, I just didn't really see them having much avenue to win. It just seemed like they staved off a really big loss rather than felt really competitive.
They kept themselves in it, but not in it enough to where it really mattered.
Yeah, exactly. But as I said, credit to them because Brisbane looked good.
Yeah, no, I agreed. Just another quick note on Cal Wilkie. He spent 100% time on ground. Did not touch the bench at all, which kind of shows how much they actually really needed him there.
Yeah.
It's like a Wiedering sort of situation because he's just that important.
Yeah, and especially when you have someone on like Wilkie. Like Brisbane, where they don't have that rotating second ruck as the other teams do. It sort of means that, yeah, your toll jobs are very set at the start. So, yeah, as I said, especially with it coming flooding in, he was either having to stay on, what do you call it, Cameron,
Yeah.
or, yeah, start to at least work in that intercept game. Try and kill a few contests because, yeah, as I said, it was just raining in their inside 50. I think Brisbane, they would have had nearly. Yeah, so they're up there with the inside 50s for the week.
That sounds
Not
about
quite
right.
as high as I thought, but yeah, there was some dominant inside 50 performances. Yeah.
Well, to their credit, it's an area of their game that they've tidied up. So
Yeah. And honestly, like, it was pretty even, as I said. Like, St Kilda still got 50 of their own. As I said, it was just far less. A lot of it was from turnover. A lot of it was from their back half too. Not much from their forward half. They were fairly accurate when they did, but yeah, as I said, it was a bit one note, but at the same time, like, I think this game's like going to have a lot of contents. Versus with how they perform.
Mhm.
I don't think it's next week. I think they have the bye, but the week after
yeah,
should say a lot about it.
Actually, I can check that briefly as to whether they have the bye this week or not.
Yeah,
they have
do.
the bye this week. Yeah, with us. Okay.
So yeah, as I said, it would just be interesting to see what this means in the scheme of things. Especially when they're a team that could use a shake-up. But yeah, as I said, if they can translate that to good scoring against teams around them, this might be a good move for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
But, yeah, we'll see.
And then just to round out the St Kilda notes, Jack Higgins, as you mentioned briefly before,
yeah,
I do have a reason as to why I'm not really a fan of him, because Richmond stood by him when he went through his brain issues, and then he was like, "No, I'm leaving anyway." Granted, St Kilda is the team he grew up with, so I get it, but like,
yeah,
it was a bit of a dog move. Anyway, he was very accurate in front of goals this week, kicking 5-1 from 14 touches and had 8 score involvements as well. So, decent performance for a small forward. It's good.
Yeah.
Very similar to a performance that happened yesterday that I'm going to talk about. A certain 2023 Norm Smith medalist kind of performance.
Yeah.
And then just to quickly round it out at the end, only one injury. Actually, not many injuries at all through this weekend, which is very good. But Liam Henry did an ankle. I did actually see the footage of it. It did look pretty rough, but I think he's only going to miss a couple of weeks, which isn't too bad.
Yeah. Which is a shame because he was generating a fair bit. As I said, just playing that weird hybrid wing forward, but he's actually starting to settle into it. Like, he gets a couple of goals now. He's inside 50s, and score involvements are normally at least solid.
It's a similar role that Brad Hill has at St Kilda. It's just kind of a position that they seem to rotate with.
Yeah, exactly. Like, Brad Hill's more of the wing focus. He's more on ball movement, whereas Henry's more attacking movement. So it's a nice little combo. It may get settled, but yeah. It's just nice because it was looking a bit like Henry was a bit out of games before that. So maybe this aggressive switch might benefit him amongst a few other players.
Yeah, especially once he recovers, of course. He'll be and the bye helps.
Oh, yeah.
Like the whole team gets a rest, but yeah, the injury right before the bye does suck.
One playing week.
Yeah. All right, you've got the second game.
Yeah. I was also going to shout out Ari Schoenmakers for his first game. I thought he was
yes, that's true. That was his first game.
Yeah. Got a bit of involvement, played on Morris. And yeah, it was just, he got the ball a bit for how much he was playing, on that tall forward. Obviously leaked 3 goals again, so maybe not quite as defensive as he might have liked. So, but yeah, as I said,
first game
jitters. At least he's getting a hand on the ball.
Yeah, exactly. Like, he'll learn with time.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, just a quick shout out before I head on to the That's say the Gabba. That's where we were.
We
We were
just were
out
there.
at Etihad. Yeah.
Now we come down to
Um,
Melbourne.
yeah. So honestly, it was a pretty emphatic statement by the Bulldogs, and they're just sort of prove that they aren't going to fade out into the season. You know, it was a bit dire last week with a few of their defenders going down.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, after Freo started off initially plucky, I thought there was some very good ball movement by them early. It looked like it was going to be like an outside versus an inside midfield battle.
Mm-hmm.
But after the pretty much halfway through the second, it was pretty much dominated by the Bulldogs inside midfields. Freo just couldn't get their hands on the ball after that. Their defense looked off by sea, and it was led by one of the Brownlow favourites, arguably one of the best. It wasn't quite as high ranking as some of the other performances this year, but I think it, honestly, equal with Marty with how much it won them the game. Bontempelli, absolutely demolished.
Gotta love the Bond.
Yeah, exactly. I think he sort of set the tone for the match. As I said at the start, the threat of Fremantle's tolls looked fairly ominous. Sturt kicked two, Tracy and Jackson both kicked one. And, as I said, it looked like their defense was an avenue of weakness for them. But, I guess Doggy sort of took Brisbane's advice and it's like, well, if you got your hands on the ball, you don't have to defend. And, it was pretty much that. Walters, I will say, also another one for Fremantle early. He looked dangerous, kicked a goal, and then unfortunately injured his hamstring on a score assist to Tracy. Tracy also missed it, unfortunately, so it was sort of salt on the winds there. And yeah, as I said, pretty much the Dogs dominated all around the ground. It was 40 points in every area of the ground, so over 40 points in the forward half. Centre bounce scores and defensive half scores. So I'm not sure how many teams have done that, but in the modern area, I would say that's a pretty rare thing to do.
Yeah, I'd make that assumption.
Yeah, and as I said, in terms of centre square, it was 7-3, so that was pretty massive. And sort of just showed where the Bulldogs can be so dangerous when they get the game going. I mentioned Bontempelli before. 30 disposals, 13 contested, 7 clearances, 10 ground ball gets, 8 marks, 15 score involvements, with 3 of those being direct goal assists, and he also got 3 goals himself.
That is a lot of good numbers.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. It's like, he didn't dominate in any specific category, but he was just so good around the ground. I think he also got a few intercepts and tackles as well. But yeah, Young sort of ran with him, but nothing he really did curb his influence. And when I say run with, it wasn't a tagging role. It was more just Fremantle were letting, talent play against talent. And unfortunately, Young seemed a bit young in terms of getting dominated by him. Wasn't just that though. Trelawn Libba had a day feasting in the centre.
It's good to see Libba back. I know he came back last week, but he didn't really have a great performance last week.
Last week was him warming up.
Yeah.
Yeah, like last week he was a bit he was good getting his hands on the ball. He just gave away a few free kicks. Wasn't quite as good in involvement.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, their whole midfield, just sans English, had 10 or more score involvements. So that's Treloar, Libba, Bont, and Ed Richards.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, as I said, even English, he kicked 2 goals himself and was really good as the game went on. I thought he dominated Darcy. And Ed Richards, the more, when he came back, I just that's sort of just who the Bulldogs are sort of missing at the moment. You can plug him anywhere. He plays inside out, forward and back.
Yep.
And just provided a lot of options. Their forward line threats rotated through the match for the Dogs. Riley West was dangerous with 4, too early, too late. Ugle Hagen registered 4 marks inside 50 and kicked 3 goals, 1. I think that was mainly in the back half. Had very solid impact.
Oh, yeah.
And Lob absolutely demolished Freo late with 3 goals. But also did a lot around the ground. 6 marks, 10 contested possessions, made it really hard for Freo to match up defensively the whole game. And honestly, I think that's his best game this season. It probably not the highest bar, but it's good to see him play well.
Especially against his old side.
O'Donnell shut down Amos, which the Dogs will love because they need, him to stand up. He's a fairly young kid. He's been pretty good, but, lack of toll options now means that he will have to play week in, week out football. And Bailey Dale and Bramble took advantage of Freo's lack of forward pressure, distributing off halfback unimposed, with Dale having 8 intercepts and 12 score involvements, with 6 of those being chains of plays started by his own possession.
Oh, yeah.
So, it wasn't just being like a little link up rinky dink. He was starting some really good movement for the Dogs. As I said, I mentioned a lot of players there because it really was a pretty big game for a lot of Dogs players. Freo, I really didn't think many players had much of an impact after the first quarter. I thought Josh Tracy presented well, but obviously he had 3 misses from a combined 65 meters out. One of those being 20 meters straight in front. But yeah, he presented well. Carl Warner, I thought he was a late sub for Chapman, played pretty well in his first, I think is his first full game, because it's normally a sub option.
Oh, yeah.
I thought he was pretty good. Walker was great early, but butchered the ball. And Luke Jackson, I think, was the other all-round good performance for Freo. Kept Liam James honest and was very solid as a second ruck. I think that's pretty much all the specific players. Like, there's more Bulldogs players you could probably mention. But, as I said, because they have their game set up, it was pretty comprehensive. Like, when they get their game going, they're just going to get stats.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just, and as for Freo, as I said, they just couldn't get the ball, hands on the ball much. They did have a couple of momentum waves. Like, they were actually okay when the game could get on their terms. It just didn't happen enough. And, and the other thing, Freo are normally fantastic defensively, but they were smashed all around the ground as their work rate was pretty poor. And as I said, they let the Bulldogs have 25 of their 36 shots no wider than the goalposts. So that's in between, the 2 behind posts, right in front of goal.
Yep.
And 21 not further than 30 meters out. So they could not stop the ball coming in deep. As I said, they couldn't get the inside 50s enough to generate themselves. But I think the other biggest worry was the centre clearance battle. So they actually won it, the centre clearances. But the Dogs made the most out of theirs because they scored 7-3. I think I mentioned that earlier, sorry. To 1-1 from centre clearance.
You did mention
with a
that
massive 10 out of 15 centre bounces, resulting in a score for them.
Oh, yeah.
So they won 15 times. 10 of them were scores. It's pretty awesome. Like, that was... I don't know if there's going to be a better ratio for that. So, yeah, sets up the Bulldogs nicely. They're now tied in the 8 with other teams. I think I wrote this a bit early.
Yeah, there's like 4 or 5 teams currently vying for the like 7th, 8th spot. Granted, it's only halfway through the season, but it's pretty tough fight.
Yeah, it is. And, as I said, it just said, like, you really got to respect them. They might be an up and down team, but you got to work really hard not to get them going. Obviously, being a bit one note, they can hurt the other way if that happens. As said, probably one of the most up and down teams in the competition. Whereas Freo, I think they're just looking for consistency against top teams. I think their midfield, despite having the clearance king in Sarong, struggles at times to get match consistency. We saw it was a bit of a problem last year, where, as I said, they can get good run in their midfield. Like, obviously when they do transition, they like their inside midfielders getting involved in chains. But in terms of centre bounces and even general stoppages, they can fade out. Much will be said all year. They haven't quite got the Darcy and Jackson set up quite correctly. At times, I've even thought Jackson's looked like the better hit ruckman. as Darcy's sort of waned a bit this year, but with injuries, being that young, he'll lift up. But at the moment, it's just a bit of a problem for them. And yeah, that's pretty much the main things in terms of overall. Yeah, how do you think the Bulldogs are going to go looking into the back half of the year? Because I said they're very scattered. Do you rate them as a real threat for finals, or do you think it's going to be a bit too inconsistent from them?
Well, it's hard to kind of compare it to specifically against Fremantle because Freo already have their own inconsistencies, right? So you kind of have to go against. You kind of have to only compare it against teams that they face that are below them and teams that they face that are above them. And the teams that they face that are above them have not really been impressive games. Like there's maybe 2 or 3 out of what we've seen so far, but from what we know of the rest of their season going towards finals, it's pretty tough. Like they have some pretty hard matches, and it's going to be those games that really tell us whether the Dogs belong in the 8 or not. Like they could beat all of the teams below them, sure, and that could get them into the 8. The same could be said for a lot of other teams that are vying for that sort of position. But I think that's if you can't put up a solid performance, win or lose, against the top 8 side, you don't really deserve to be there.
Yeah, and it's a very even year this year. Like, there's a lot of even splits within the top 8. Like, no one, except for Sydney, has a real positive record. I think Carlton.
I think Carlton are the only other ones at the moment.
Yeah, I think they're the only one with positive records. I think Collingwood's still 50-50, but
I know Hawthorn are 50-50. Hawthorn are currently sitting 7-7.
Yeah. So, in terms of matches against the top 8?
Oh, no, I mean just overall score. Matches against the top 8, yeah, that's definitely a lot different.
Yeah, no, so I meant positive record against the top 8. I think Sydney and Carlton, by memory, are the only teams to have it.
Yeah, off the top of my head, I think it's only those 2.
Yeah, I think Collingwood might be tied, but yeah, as I said, so there's not much dominance, is what I'm saying. Those things will be flexible, but yeah, as I said, it does mean you're going to have to take a few scalps to stay in the 8. You might have to get a run. And yeah, it's hard to see the Bulldogs doing that with the performances they've gotten this. But in terms of their opposition, they've got more chance than the Dockers think
absolutely
have this year, I think.
And plus they have
it's looking
like Freo are a younger side. They have younger players. They're a much younger squad. Like, they still have a lot of experience to be able to learn until they're probably ready for like a strong finals run. But the Dogs have that experience. Some of those players that are still there have won a grand final, have played multiple finals
it's
alone.
A window. Like, it's a really good mix in a list, and obviously the commentary around Bevo is like not getting as much out of that list as they probably should.
Yeah.
But honestly, as I said, if it wasn't for just you expect inconsistencies from the Dogs, like most people would have had them in the 8.
Yeah, absolutely.
Preseason, just off list. It's just a very apparent thing with the Bulldogs.
If they're able to try and like stave off injury concerns to a lot of their core players, I think they can have much stronger performances against top 8 teams and probably break into the game.
Yeah, exactly. And how they're the team that will sort of like they'll scare whoever's in 5th in the first week of finals.
Well, it's like
on their day.
This isn't exactly like their 2016 run, but it is in one sense where they are probably one of the underdog teams going into the back half of this season.
Yeah.
But it's also like there is still a high chance that they won't have that miracle run.
No, and I think also the other similarity is they're trying to get enough players to find their feet, because obviously 2016 was probably a slightly weaker list. Defense was a lot better, but forward line was still like a lot of kinks and all that sort of stuff. And then, like, as you remember, some really weird players had some good games. Obviously,
a lot of those players are very much retired at this point.
Yeah, I mean, you know what I'm thinking? The tall forward. I keep on thinking Josh Bruce, but it's not.
No, it wasn't him. He was still at St Kilda at the time.
Tom Boyd. is it Clay Smith?
Yeah.
Had a really good prelim final.
And even prior to his injury, Bob Murphy was having a really good
Oh
season.
yeah, like that is not the sort of the player I was talking about, but you
No,
know what
but
I mean. Like
yeah.
just players to, um, you know, in their lower half of the list to really tie it together. If they can find positions, because as I said, they have shown some good signs. They've just been a bit played all over the place. So yeah, they're just looking for that gel. So it's a scary prospect if they do get it together. I'm still
Absolutely,
a bit
because
doubtful.
yeah, again, like they have great players, and they have a lot
Oh
of
yeah.
really good, strong young talent. They just
I think most teams would just literally transplant the Bulldogs inside midfield into their team.
absolutely
Like
yeah,
most teams would just take the trade.
like
Like if
there
they
is
were like, you have to lose all your inside players,
there is
but you get the
definitely
Bulldogs.
there is definitely a few players on our list that I would happily trade for the doggies midfield.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, like I said, that's pretty standard for them. But yeah, we'll see how it goes at the end of the year.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how they perform, especially over the next couple of weeks after like buys and stuff. Once every team's kind of
Yeah,
back. All right.
yeah,
Speaking of my team, that's where we're going next. We're going across the road,
yep.
across the city to the MCG
Mm.
to a Saturday twilight game between Richmond and Hawthorn. Dustin Martin's 300s game.
Yeah,
The Hawks, you know, as everyone is definitely well aware of now, they played spoiler. I don't think anyone's surprised. They
mm.
have been in pretty impressive form, and
Yeah,
I'll be honest. If I wasn't tipping with my heart this week, I would have tipped with my head and tipped with them because they look
yeah.
so good.
I must admit,
Actually watching them in person, you can see what their game
yeah,
plan really looks like much better, and it's insane what Sam Mitchell has done.
yeah. They are well knit. And you know, it's sort of last week we were talking about it, and it was like, you know, like you're excited, because Richmond obviously playing for Dusty and all that,
Yeah,
and it's one of those
normally
things
we at
where,
least put up decent performances in milestone games or like big marquee
yeah,
games. Yeah, there was not really much of that. First quarter was kind of really all we got, and there was a bit of fight in the fourth. But Hawthorn had control the
yeah,
entire day, pretty much.
pretty much, yeah. And but it was good to see the crowd there. And I was gonna say, like, this felt like a game where it could have given you a swing, but I just think at the moment there's just a bit of separation between Hawthorn and Richmond.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
and it's not even just in terms of like ladder position or anything. It's just team structure, and
yeah,
that's
exactly.
not to say our injuries are a concern at the moment. Yeah, like we're still missing a lot of like quite a few key
Yeah.
players, but we still have a lot of veteran talent. We have multiple premiership players out on that field. It's just half of them just didn't really show up. Like, yeah, I'm going to talk about
Yeah.
a couple that I thought stood out really well, but Hawthorn are just so much stronger, and a lot of that comes from Sicily's work off halfback.
Oh yeah.
Because
You were talking about meters gained before. He actually ended up having the
yeah,
most meters gained.
I know, I have it
Uh,
noted down.
yeah, okay.
So the scoreline for the entire game was 6-13-49 to 14-13-97. 8 goals square. Hawthorn, which is pretty much very much more accurate. And Sicily was a very big part of how efficient they were on field. You know, being the captain, lead by example,
Mm.
and his players just worked for him. Like they wasn't even the players working
Yeah.
for Sam Mitchell; they were working for Sicily because he was doing everything.
Yeah.
So
Honestly,
yeah,
oh
go
yeah,
on.
go.
No, go on.
I was gonna say, like, he's definitely one of those players that, especially when you got a team like Hawthorn and they are still technically rebuilding, just his ability, you know, because when you're a key when you're a key defensive player, sometimes it's hard to have that direct influence on the game.
Absolutely.
But yeah, as I said, James Sicily just has no problems going where he needs to go in any given time and situation, and you know,
He
doing the work.
as much as you know, as a Richmond supporter, you hate seeing someone have that good of a performance on the opposing team. But as an
Yeah,
AFL fan, it was incredible to
yeah,
watch. Like
yeah,
33
exactly.
touches, 81.8% efficiency, 10 intercept possessions,
Mm.
15 marks, 12 rebound 50s, 881 meters gained, and 97% time on ground.
Mm. It was just
And
full bodied.
to be fair to well, I wouldn't say to be fair because it was a bad thing, but like we were pretty much we're only really looking for Tom Lynch all evening, and that's because he's our primary tall, right? He's the only kind of tall that we have
Yeah.
in our forward line. He was constantly getting 2v1 in the back line. There's
Yeah.
not much
It
more
was
you
pretty
could really
set.
do. So we
Yeah.
we didn't really have many other options to go with. And like if we lowered our eyes, you'd have Sicily just all over us. So
Yeah.
that back line just
Exactly.
had us completely beaten.
It's one of those times where you just like, you want to be like, man, is this the time where we think of like putting the ground ball into the forward half? You know, like kicking it off the deck just to like nullify that sort of forward entry.
Yeah, but then you have
Like, no
Sicily
team's gonna do
just
it.
there.
But you know what I mean? It's just, you know, and especially with Richmond, we have such a better ground general play ball.
Yeah,
You know,
that's
but
also something that I actually really noted. Like Hawthorn are have been really strong in the air this season, but one of our strengths has always been off ground balls. It's something that like when we have clear tools in, like Tom Lynch, it seems to be something that we just forget to do.
yeah, and it's as I said, so that's like one of my favorite. It's probably not actually going to work, but if I was a coach, I would like convince my team that
Just give it
dribbling
a
it into the
try.
forward 50 exactly, you know. But yeah, as I said, it wasn't really an option. Hawthorn were very set up defensively.
Yeah, and their
Um,
midfield was just all over us as well.
oh yeah,
Like Jai Newcomb, for example, he had a standout
beautiful.
performance. 26 touches,
Yeah,
73.1% efficiency, 12 contested possessions, 8 marks, 5 inside 50s, 4 clearances, 11 score involvements, and 21 pressure acts, and a goal.
yeah.
And
I
then
mean, if you weren't going to give it to Sicily, who I would still give it to, it'd probably be Newcomb.
Newcomb, Will Day also had a standout performance. Like,
Yeah.
granted, Day's been incredible pretty much all like ever since he came back from
Oh
injury.
yeah,
Like,
the difference between Hawthorn with and without Day is quite phenomenal,
it's
really.
daylight. Like,
Yeah,
they need him, and they just need to hope that he doesn't get injured again.
yeah. And I will say, like, it's not so much they need exactly Will Day, is they need a young player with class.
And
You
he
know, a
is
bit of energy, a bit of speed.
he's a young player
And
with class for
yeah,
them. Yeah.
exactly.
And then Mabio Chol, former Richmond player, went to the Suns, left the Suns because Dimmer went up there. There's a bit of history there, but he was very, very accurate this week, kicking 4-1 from 7 touches. You know, low amount of touches, but Hawthorn also had multiple contributors in terms of scoreline, which is why he had
Yeah,
such a low
exactly.
touches, which is fine. 4 marks, I believe 3 of them were inside 50, and 7 score involvements.
Yep. So pretty much, you know, as I said, even when you don't get it, like being that marking threat inside forward 50, it forces defenders to play differently. I thought in terms of structure, like it wasn't just the 4 goals won. It was the looming threat of him. And also, again, what Hawthorn were generating from their midfield as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I think
So two-pronged.
I think our weakest point at the moment is our defense. Like,
Yeah.
granted, we have great players back there, but we're also missing
Mm,
Tyler Young, who's been phenomenal, and Josh Gibcus, who is
yeah, it's more the lockdown defenders that you're
who was like
not
what
really having at the moment.
top 3 draft pick when we got him, and he's had 2 ACLs.
Yeah.
They both currently have ACL injuries, so it's like we don't have many other options.
No, as I said, I'm not really having a go at Richmond for their deep defense. It's just a very obvious area of lack.
One thing I did spot that happened in the 4th quarter, because it didn't happen any earlier for some godforsaken reason, was moving Kaczynski from the forward line to the back line, where we've been having him in the VFL the past couple of weeks. And like,
It was quite good.
yeah, like apparent off the top of my head, he was initially recruited to Hawthorn as a defender. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I understand probably why he was needed as a forward at the time, like for Hawthorn, and that's kind of just something he's kept up.
They were like trialing 3 main players, being what's his name?
I think Hardwick was probably one of the other ones at the time as well, and then he got put into the
Yeah.
back line because he got moved up to the forward line, something like that.
Yeah. I mean, I can't remember the name, so it doesn't matter. So, but yeah, as I said, he seems comfortable. And to be honest, he wasn't terrible.
No, I think he
Um,
actually works really well
even
with Bolter down the back as well. Like,
yeah, I
Grant,
was gonna say even up forward he wasn't too
no,
bad.
and we got a goal out of him against his old side. Like, that's something you love to see.
Yeah, yeah, it was just as I said. I think he liked having Lynch back. It's just when Lynch was, and I'll say he needed another game or two to really get going. Like you're not gonna fault them for playing him early. They need him for structure, but
Yeah, no,
it was just a
absolutely.
tough ask. But you could see when maybe that opens it up. Again, it's a real shame that McCarthy Lafau. He would be another one that really benefited from that
Well,
because he
that
can break away.
another ACL
Is
injury.
just exactly. It would have for next year though, like having that speed breaking away player, complementing, taking some players away from Tom Lynch and Jacob Kaczynski, might open it up for them.
Well,
So
that was kind
there's
of
some
why we
positives.
had Bolter up forward because
Yeah,
Lynch and Bolter are meant to be like the two talls rather than like how it was Lynch and Rewell. Meant to
yeah,
have number one, number two defender, and you're able to actually split them rather than playing two on
mm,
one. But yeah, Hawthorn just had our number pretty much all evening.
yeah.
Still a
That's
great
pretty
game.
much.
Like granted, we didn't kick many goals, so the Richmond side of the
Ah,
environment wasn't all that great. But the whole atmosphere of just 92,311 people
mm,
in a regular home and away match is insane, and it's not even a marquee game.
no. And then and after the first goal too, like hearing that on TV was just so.
My
I
my
like. I can imagine how good that was live.
it was incredible. My one regret though was he was paying $5 to kick the first goal, and I wished I had to put something on because that little bit of money would have been nice. Anyway,
No.
we've been talking about Hawthorn enough. I want to shout out a couple of Richmond players that I think stood out to me. Tim Taranto, kind of a pretty obvious one.
Yeah.
He's
He's
daylight, like what we need in our midfield. He like when he was out, we looked a lot worse. With him in, we
yeah.
do look better. There's obviously we have issues all over the ground, but I think he is a key component as to how our midfield structure works. There was a moment, so I was sitting pretty much in the pocket. Well, I wouldn't say in the pocket. I was like right up against the 50-meter line and the pocket on the punt right end. And there was a key moment in the game where there were three of our players kind of running into a brick wall of Hawthorn. Player on the left handballed it directly to Taranto, and then he very, very quickly handballed it straight away to the player on his right. Clean disposal, and it was probably the most silkiest thing that I've ever seen him do.
Yeah.
It was actually like beautiful, and we managed to get it out of. I think that was our back 50 at the time. I think it was second quarter. So he's clean. He has good skills. It's just being having a better structure around him so we can perform a lot stronger.
Yeah.
He's putting up great numbers now, but there's no sort of consistent. I don't know the word that I'm looking for. Consistent value coming
Yeah.
from the midfield to the forward line.
Yeah, okay, I can. Yeah, I mean, it's sort of like Fremantle, as I was saying earlier. Like, you can win the clearances at times and all that, but
Yeah, like
it's just,
we have
and
Taranto
obviously Richmond had that,
4 clearances.
excuse. Yeah,
Like he got 8 clearances and 6 of them were from stoppage, which is because we prefer to work on stoppages rather than from center clearances, even though center clearances have always been our weakness. Anyway,
exactly.
Taranto's stats overall: 33 touches, 15 contested possessions, 6 marks, 8 clearances, 7 score involvements, and a goal. Good to see.
And 8 clearances was double the next best player, which is pretty.
And again,
insane.
like 6 of them were stoppage clearances.
Yeah.
Which is still very, very good. I thought Hugo
And it's good for him because, especially in the forward half too, he's a very good forward half player. In fact, he wants to kick more goals. He's just historically been a pretty awful shot.
He's not the greatest of shots.
No,
but I appreciate that it's something that he's working on.
Yeah, but great forward half player.
Absolutely. I thought Hugo Ralphsmith also had a really, really good game. I'm a big Hugo Ralphsmith fan. I think I've talked about this in the past.
Yeah,
he's one of our younger players that I definitely want us to keep. And I believe he's re-signed recently, so that's very, very good. So
The logical conclusion to Cameron McIntosh, I think.
yeah, pretty much with Macca, getting on in years. Pickett probably retiring the end of this year, maybe next year.
Mm.
Like he's definitely a wingman that I want us to keep. So he finished with 14 touches at 85.7% efficiency, 9 marks, 3 inside 50s, 4 score involvements, 22 pressure acts, and 386 meters gained. And then a final statistic for this game. So I mentioned the attendance before, 92,311.
Mm.
I was one of them. I love being a number.
Yeah.
It was the second biggest Richmond home and away crowd ever.
Mm.
And the biggest crowd ever against Hawthorn.
Yeah.
And I believe since that's taken over, I think the one that held the record prior to that was the 2018 qualifying final. No.
Yeah, it was Collingwood
Yes.
first.
No, it was Richmond Hawthorn 2018 qualifying final.
That was Richmond Hawthorn, wasn't it? Okay.
Yeah, and then because we played Collingwood in the prelim and then lost to Mason Cox.
Yeah.
And then they lost to the West Coast, so we don't care.
I got my ordering wrong, but yeah, I get you.
Yeah, I was having a discussion with Mum about it. It's like, who did we play in the 2018 qualifier? And turns out, it was Hawthorn. Because I was at that game. I remember it.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's for it not being a non-marquee game and not a finals game. Not over 92,000 people is incredible. Just to celebrate one player. Granted, Hawthorn being in great form, that definitely helps get the Hawthorn people in. But
exactly.
Not at least 90% of people were there to see Dusty, win or lose.
I think so, yeah. And I think it's also like, again, obviously he's not going to be there because going to Tasmania, and you sing his praises all the time.
He's from Victoria. Why would he go to Tassie?
I know, but honestly, like, that game doesn't happen without him.
No, absolutely.
Like, the culture that they've built up for Richmond, even when they were starting to struggle, or like in his early years where they were losing elimination finals, he really bolstered them, kept them into it, very clear plan, and it's made Richmond a very easy team, I would say, to support, even while they have been struggling the last couple of years.
Especially even if
really glad.
Even if you do support a team that naturally are rivals to Richmond, like your Collingwoods, your Carltons, your Essendons.
Yeah.
Like everyone loves Dusty. You can't
Yeah, exactly.
That.
Yeah.
It's like how I'm a big fan, as much as I hate Collingwood, it's kind of in the blood to hate Collingwood. I really like Jeremy Howe, for example.
Oh, yeah.
He's probably been one of my favorite players to watch out of that side.
Exactly. Probably going to be one of the bigger ones we're going to talk about coming up. But...
yeah, I do actually have some notes on him, so good good thing you mentioned that. But you're next.
Yeah, no, I'm a bit the same. It's like, I hated the fact that he left Melbourne, going to Collingwood when Melbourne were pretty much rabble. But I understood why. And then I was like, I don't really want him to do well, but because he's just so nice to watch, you're like, I never really hated him, but you know what I mean? Is like any possible resentment I just couldn't really have. He's a excitement machine. Very, very smart as well. I will say, with his distribution. But yeah, as I said, one of the best marks of the modern era. Yeah, I would say.
Absolutely. All right, you've got the next game, Saturday night.
Oh, sure. Yes. So Adelaide versus the Sydney Swans. Probably it was looking to be a bit of an upset early. They were pretty, I wouldn't quite say dominant against Sydney for good chunks of the match, but they were controlling the game for 3 quarters. And then pretty much a 4th quarter fade out happened. Sydney absolutely smashed them. Joel Amartey, it was pretty much a celebration for him by the end of it. Kicked 9 goals. And pretty much the last 10 minutes were people swearing at the TV because he was sitting on the bench.
Yep. Everyone wanted him to get his 10th, and they just Horse
and
said
then
no.
Horse. He had 2 minutes rest early on 10-8, which is, fair enough. He's been having a pretty big game. But then at the end, they sit him. He's just laughing at the bench, Look, honestly, sack Horse. You can't be doing that. Dog act. At least ban him for a week.
I know you're joking, but
Um,
you can't say that.
you can't. It's just not football. Like, and like it's very hard to kick 10. Like he may never get that chance again. So shame on you, horse. Sydney Flex 3 games clear away from at the top of the ladder. Pretty dominant. Yeah, Adelaide actually had some pretty solid conversion when they got their ball into their forward 50 all night. Um, they were forced to respect Sydney of those, and they didn't actually gain that much territory. But yeah, as I said, it was more like in the initial quarters, they had a lot more forward opportunities, and that just sort of dwindled as the night went on. I thought their forward line pretty much clicked this game. Generated a lot of marks inside 50. Got a few scored forward half turnovers. Helped score be pretty sustainable. But yeah, as I said, once Sydney got hands on the ball, they just did what they did. They just, not only controlled the ball themselves, but limited the amount of outlets that the Crows had. And for the entire night, the Crows only won 4 centre clearances to 19, despite being around even in the ground stoppages.
That's crazy.
So, while it's not that, I mean, some teams are just not as good in the centre clearances.
Richmond.
When you're up against Sydney, and, not only are you not getting territory, you're giving territory dominance to Isaac Heaney. He's turning into be one of the best forward distributors in the game. And giving Grundy some really good looks at it as he absolutely smashed up Strawn. He seems just to be a bit raw still. I don't think they can continue running him in the centre. I think we'll probably see... I was about to say Jacobs back. That might be a throwback. Riley O'Brien back.
Yes. Yeah, he'll probably come back in.
Yeah. Yeah, so yeah, as I said, Adelaide's... And, after a while... they were still in it in the fourth quarter, but a defensive collapse and, a heap of inside 50s just sort of caused the score to dissipate. They lost 10-7, 67 to 16-13, 109. Obviously, I'll give you one guess at the best player on the ground for the night. It was Joel Amartey.
Yep.
Not even going to let you.
Hey, I could have thrown in a random name in there.
Yeah, pretty much unmannable in defense. 7 marks inside 50. 3 of those were contested. So he had 4 tackles as well. And they'll roll forward 50 to go with his 9 goals won from 10 possessions. So every possession was a score for him. And as I said, last week I also mentioned he presented so well, and it would be nice to get a bit of reward for that.
I read
I wasn't quite predicting.
I read the stat before, and it makes complete sense. It's 10 possessions, 10 kicks, 10 scores. That's very rare to actually get something so clean in terms of statistics.
Yeah, exactly. And as I said, it just made him so hard to match up against, because I said he was getting the contested marks too. It wasn't just Adelaide struggling with the matchup, which obviously they did. They sort of half went between Keane and I don't think it was Murray.
I know Butts was out there a lot. Might have been Butts against him.
Yeah. They were sort of rotating between Keanes and Butts to pretty much, I won't say little effect, but it was very hard for them. Yeah. I mean, overall, I actually think Sydney's defense started off. Adelaide's defense started off okay. Obviously, another player that is back for them, Nick Murray, coming off an ACL. He was a very good inclusion back. I think he had write some stats on him. He had 7 intercepts, 4 intercept marks. Gave away 6 free kicks, of course, but they still overall like him back. But yeah, as I said, I'd actually say that a lot of, the hardness was just from the amount of inside 50s that Sydney were able to get.
Yeah.
Especially in that second half. Most for the round 61 compared to Adelaide with the least of them out 35. So it was pretty much, while Adelaide were in it for most of it, and it did blow out in that last quarter. That's why I said Adelaide didn't really have much control. It's just they were defending okay, and then it just fell apart at the seams. Anyway, so controlling the middle, we had Grundy, 49 hitouts out of 74.
You can't stop him.
Yeah, pretty much. 9 clearances, 30 possessions, a match-leading 18 ground ball gets. So he was absolutely massive. Heaney, 11 score involvements, 29 possessions, 2 goals. And James Robon, he wasn't actually as tagging as much this game. He got 8 centre clearances, quadruple Adelaide's next best, who was at 2. That was Michael Annie.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, as I said, even though Sydney didn't get as many direct scores as they normally do from their midfield, that was actually a bit quote. It didn't really matter. They were still scoring from their midfield at the same time. In terms of Adelaide, a bit of positive. Laird, absolutely fantastic game. 34 possessions, 15 contested, 80% efficiency, 6 tackles, 6 score involvements, and 7 intercepts. So a very complete game from him. And also I thought they had a lot of off-the-ball efforts too. A few game players who didn't have big stats. Rochelle being one of them. 10 disposals, but high pressure. 26 pressure acts for the game. I think that was a game high. 3 score involvements and intercepts for him. And Ben Keys, I thought, worked out to get the forward pressure going. But yeah, as I said, their attack was okay. It was just not that many entries in. I also thought Fogarty continues to perform well as a lead-up option. Didn't have many disposals, still kicked his 2. But yeah, it's making that forward line look a lot more complete at the moment. Isaac Rankin also kicked in with a couple of nice kicks. I didn't think he was as dominant.
It was good to see Rankin back, though.
Yeah, exactly. He wasn't as dominant around the ground this time, but he still adds a whole lot more to that midfield forward versatility. Yeah, and also talking about that, something that wasn't so much it wasn't. In terms of the flow of the game, it wasn't a huge thing, but I was a bit surprised. They had a lot of rotation for centre bounce attendances, with 20 unique players seeing the centre bounces. Adelaide were having a more...
Actually.
Yeah, Adelaide had the more diverse midfield mix, with Michael Annie seeing the most with 67, excluding Strawn, who's obviously the ruckman in most of them.
So what, you would assume that the only, 3 players that didn't make a centre bounce would be the full forward, the full back, and maybe a wingman or something like that?
No, this is 10 each.
10, sorry.
20 overall. No, that would be ridiculous.
That would be a crazy statistic for one team.
Sorry, I wasn't mean. I'm just saying there was a high midfield mix. But I was meaning to highlight the sort of cohesion of Sydney's versus the finding the feet of
kind of just
Adelaide's,
the bunch together sort of midfield.
Yeah, so Rankin and Dawson saw 52, and the rest saw under 50%. And as I said, it's not right or wrong, but as I said, it's something that I think Adelaide are sort of doing a bit of a reset at the moment.
Yeah, because
trying to figure out their midfield again.
You look at the pieces that they have at the moment, and they are missing a lot because of injuries. They just lost Matt Crouch.
Yeah,
but granted, they got back Rankin, which is great for them. But losing Matt Crouch definitely hurt their midfield structure.
Yeah, that was huge. And as I said, at the time, they seem to have that set after a poor start. So it's been Adelaide's year. The start, it seemed a bit incohesive. They started to build it all together, and then unfortunately, just through injuries, it's just fallen a bit apart. So yeah, as I said, I guess the positive side is they still held together for 3/4 of the game before getting blown out. And then they actually made Sydney seem a lot more tepid. There wasn't a lot of scoring off halfback, which is normally where Sydney can still get a few goals. Obviously a lot of it's forward half, but it's still respectable in the back line, especially with players like Cunningham and McInerney.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And Lloyd, of course, generating off that halfback line. But yeah, so it just didn't happen for them. But as I said, like when the best thing you're saying, like about Sydney is like, oh, you know, I bet, yeah, as I said, it's just ridiculous.
Do you subscribe to the idea that Sydney really are a second half team? Because you look at their performances. Well, you look at, I'd say, most of their performances over the past, let's say, 2 months, for example, just an arbitrary sort of amount of games.
Yeah.
Majority of their games have been won in the second half, and it's normally like between the latter half of the third quarter and early in the fourth.
Yeah.
So it's like, is it something that teams need to learn how to shut that down, or is Sydney just finding another whole gear?
I think it's actually the other way. Yeah, like, I don't even think it's Sydney finding another gear. I think it's just so hard to defend Sydney. And the way that they've got the style set up is I think that teams are tiring themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Because, Adelaide had technically a bit of dominance, but, it required a lot of forward half work to result. Obviously, their backline was overstretched. But, when you think about it, like, when Sydney weren't looking that great, their deep backs, I thought, were very good at preventing, like, it becoming a real issue. Again, I'll say, I think one of the biggest, not turnarounds, but the inclusion of Lewis Melican
yes.
to, just for that lockdown player, that allows Tom McCartan to, play a bit more freely, make those decisions to eventually go off his player, try and create some intercepts or like kill contests. And overall, it just sort of holds the fort down and allows Sydney to play with the confidence that even when they're not playing the best, it's still within arm's reach.
Well, that in saying that, do you think Sydney have one of the more older playing lists, especially that their core? Do you think that because their primary older structure allows them to have much more legs to be able to run out more games, and that contributes to why they can be so strong in the second half as well?
Yeah, I mean, look,
because they still have younger players. Like they've got Warner for an example.
Yeah,
he's probably one of the
I think it's just
stars.
like the core, like you're
Golden.
saying, like, I mean, they're still not that old, like know, but when you've got like Heaney, Grundy, who's got amazing aerobic capacity,
considering his late 20s, that's insane.
Yeah, even Taylor Adams, like he was still running a lot during the end of the match. I think he's 30, 31.
He's getting there. He's at least late 20s.
Yeah. So you know what I mean? Like, I think it's just the combined, like, as I said, the fact that, again, like I said last week, like, if you don't have the fastest midfield, like, like you're going to put your fastest player on, like, you're going to put your fastest player on Warner.
Yeah.
And then, maybe you got like a contested player that's, a bit slower, but still enough. That goes on Heaney. You got to have a fast player on the outside to go on Goulden.
Yeah.
And then, as I said,
you could have a decent ruck to match up against Grundy as well.
Like Taylor Adams is going, that too. But like Taylor Adams is going to get the weakest, of your midfield matchup.
Yeah, because he's probably the oldest player out of that core, but that doesn't mean he's weak by any means.
No, exactly. And, as I said, on the wing too, as I said, Blakey didn't actually play much on the wing. He sort of played a bit more defensively.
Mm-hmm.
But when he does go up there, it's a very hard speed to match. Sam Wicks, obviously, compared to the other players we're talking about, is not that huge, but he's also very fast.
And then also you've got players like Melican, like Rowbottom, generating so much value off of half-back that it's also just unstoppable in that sort of area as well.
Yeah, and you know what I'm saying? It's just like when you have that structure set up, like you just know at some point during the match, like you're going to get a bit more space to do what you want to do. And, you know, as I said, I don't even think it's switching gears. You know what I mean? It's just when you're so convinced of your plan,
It's just
that when
outpacing
it's
other
not
teams.
going well, yeah, exactly. When it's not going well, you're still like, well, we're not getting exactly all we want out of it. But if we continue going, we know it's going to beat the opponents. It's just a matter of time. And it's allowed Sydney to play with a lot of confidence. And, you know, when you're young players, it trickles down into the young players because, you know, we're going to talk about a team next up as we probably wrap this up who, you know, sort of went back into their own shell, probably played a style which has faded away late. Like they look good early, but they can't continue it.
Yeah, we're going to touch
where
on
like Sydney are the exact opposite. Like they might not start well all the time, but they just know their strength continues and it's not an actual issue. So yeah, it's definitely, it's a very tight knit plan. And as I said, honestly, I'm still convinced that this might be one of the greatest teams in the decade in terms of regular season. Obviously, finals is a different kettle of fish.
Yes, it is. Absolutely.
But yeah, as I said, I couldn't imagine anyone not having Sydney making the grand final,
and like,
at least in theory.
And even then, you still look at this team, and they still don't even have Luke Parker in it. Like,
yeah,
how do you insert a player like that, a player with his sort of talents, into this team that's already so stacked?
I mean, honestly, it might take injury to get him because they don't really. Either that or he just plays outside as well.
Yeah.
Like, that's the only other way. But they've got such a big forward rotation too, so, you know, at the very least, it gives them a lot of depth to where, like, if they do, and I hope it doesn't happen because I love watching them.
No, absolutely not. Honestly, as much as, you know, the interstate teams, you know, big bias, a little bit of big bias in this one, but, like, Sydney are an incredible team to watch this season.
Yeah. But yeah, you know what I mean? It's just like, you always have to plan, like, you know, Longmire knows, he's been in the biz long enough that, you know, it doesn't take much for the wheels to come off, you know, bad luck's always something that can influence a season, and you always have to be a bit proactive. So yeah, the fact that they've got players that can just plug in and play, you know, as I said, even the sub, Matt Roberts, like, he's not the worst player ever, you know what I mean? Like, he's a young kid showing a bit of form. He just can't break into this team at the moment. But the fact that he could play, you know...
And, like, you look at how some teams even use their sub. Like, in some cases, it's not a bad idea to have a really strong player as a sub because means you can insert them whenever, and they're just going to click like that.
Yeah, well, as I said, for a young kid, Matt Roberts actually plays a fair bit of roles. I think he's also played a bit up forward, or like more wing forward. But,
name definitely sounds familiar when we've talked about it in the past.
Yeah, he's Ginger. Had a really great couple of games early when Sydney were missing a few midfielders. I think Mills was out as well.
Mills was out. Adams was still out.
Yeah. So, yeah, as I said, just sort of, you know, taking a side step because Adams is just too good not to prioritize. But yeah, he's fantastic for structure. And yeah, they just got a lot. Like Braden Campbell, young player, tall on the wing, does his role, doesn't need to do much. But, you know, as I said, he's that fast, tall threat on the wing, you know, so they're getting a lot of value on a lot of their players. As I said, it's really nitpicking to say maybe their told forward structure hasn't been that good. But, you know, as I said, Amartey's been trying and he's converted now. So, you know, it makes that look a lot better even. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, absolutely.
And as for Adelaide, you know, they had a period of dominance. You know, I think it's a bit like St Kilda where
they might have entirely had control the entire game, but it's definitely a game that there were good positive signs and they can learn from it.
Yeah, exactly. I think unlike St Kilda, like Adelaide actually had an avenue to win. It's just Sydney were just too good a side for that to be sustainable. And yeah, they ended up just outmuscling them at the end. But in terms of structure and what they wanted to do, as I said, I wanted a bit more effort in that last quarter. But, you know, overall, you know, it's the pieces. And against Sydney, it can be a bit disheartening at times. They just take, not so much they, you know, play very well on their own brand of football, they're very good at taking stuff away from you.
Mhm.
And, as I said, that showed a lot in the midfield. And, made Adelaide look a bit weak despite having an okay game. Excellent conversion as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
I thought that, even all night, I thought, it was one of the better conversion games. But, yeah, I think that's about wraps it up, unless there's anything more you want to say about Adelaide or Sydney.
No, I think we're pretty good. I do want to just quickly say that I do think Adelaide are a decent team, but again, it's just injuries that have just really kind of hampered their season. Especially because they still don't really have a forward line. Like, again, still missing Phil Thorpe. Tex is currently out. It's not really a great sort of structure.
It's not small pressure either. It's, reliant on those tolls, and they don't have all the pieces to run it, so...
No. It's, unlucky season, especially after the season they had last year. But, maybe the second half will kind of push them up a bit.
Yeah. And there's stuff that they needed to work on too, but, as I said, they would be in the pack of, teams that are...
They'd be solidly in the middle if they had, at least, at this point.
I don't think they'll be at the 8 at the moment, but, they would be with arm's reach of it.
Yeah, they'd be
maybe a
one or two games
level.
Sort of. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Speaking of good conversion, Sunday's game at Marvel Stadium was a very, very well conversion game. However, was not to the favour of North Melbourne at the end of the day. Collingwood came back from 54 points down at 3/4 time to stop an upset by the Kangaroos hunting for their second win. And to North's credit, they looked damn good. For solid 3/4 of that game, they looked like they weren't a bottom 4 team. And we've been talking about this pretty much all season long. They have really, really good pieces. They have a lot of strong talent. They've recruited well from other teams. Granted, some of those players that they have recruited are injured, but the point kind of...
I think they've recruited well. I think it's just...
I mean, there's still a lot of pieces that they are missing, but the players that they have gained so far have been pretty decent for them.
I think it's just more... The distribution of their list is a big problem.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of structure issues that they're still trying to deal with.
Yeah, exactly. I've been talking about that. The defense is obviously the main
selling point. We've been talking about that all season long. That the defense is not great.
This is where you could see things come together. You could see an identity of a very forward half turnover-based teams. We're seeing teams with weaker defense being able to, stave off teams just due to the fact that they dominate so much out the center, which is, where a lot of things happened for North in this game. But yeah, I'll let you continue how it sort of unfortunately unraveled.
Yeah, it was
after halftime.
Wasn't a pretty sight after 3/4 time, at all. So the final scoreline was 19-4-118. That's North Melbourne's score. It was their home game. That's insanely accurate for them. To 18-11-119. A devastating 1-point loss. But, Collingwood are the reigning premiers for a reason. They have a particular game style that they love to play, and it seems to thrive at pretty disheartening moments.
Yeah. Look, as I said, in terms of confidence, they're on Sydney levels, in that they never are convinced that they're out of the game. I'm not sure, because I think, I wasn't messaging you, I was messaging some other people, and I was like, any other team like Collingwood, I wouldn't, or maybe Sydney with the way they're going now, I wouldn't believe that they would come back. As I said, it's just it's expected almost.
I mean, if you'd watched the games that up to that point, you probably wouldn't really expect it until you start seeing them pile on the goals in the first couple of minutes.
Yeah, I had him as a slight chance in the third quarter. Although I did find it impressive that the Bulldogs were able to rebound in various points where Collingwood looked to be getting back.
Yeah. Anyway,
in the second quarter when Collingwood got a run of a few goals, I think there was another patch in the third. And then they just got the goals that were needed. I think Cherry kicked an absolutely fantastic one on the boundary line.
Yeah, that's
Sort of
correct.
curved that. But yeah, as I said,
it's those sort of little patches, raise the hopes a little.
yeah, and it was just like, but it was the end of the third quarter where you could sense that Collingwood were really scarily getting back in it.
Absolutely. And, credit to their midfield. They did a lot of hard running, and especially underrated ball magnet Jack Crisp. I know, he
Oh, yeah.
won. I know he won the medal on King's birthday weekend. He's had a really stellar season, kind of all around. But I still think he's pretty underrated in terms of how their structure has been. But because of the injuries that they've
Yeah.
had, like no DeGoey, no Elliot,
Yeah.
they've had a lot of play. Granted, you have both the Dacos still out there, and they're always going to star. But that's why I think Jack
Yeah.
Crisp is so underrated for them. So he finished with 27 touches, 77.8% efficiency, 11 contested possessions, 6 inside 50, 6 clearances, 8 score involvements, 7 tackles, 26 pressure acts, which I think was possibly game high, and a goal.
Yeah.
He was, like a lot of those stats definitely happened in the second half. Like he was very much their primary ball carrier up to the midfield. And he is really, really good to watch. He's really fun to watch. He just knows what he's doing whenever he has hands on it.
Yeah, it's like one of those nice complementary midfielders because, obviously Dacos, we've mentioned, is very balanced, but Chris just gets that nice offensive focus.
And he is a bigger body too. So if he tries to get tackled, he normally is able to shrug him off.
Exactly. And on the flip side, he knows how to tackle himself, provides a lot of pressure, as you mentioned. It was actually the second most pressure acts, but tied. McCreary had the most, but that's sort of to be expected. That's
predominantly his role as a pressure player.
Yeah, exactly. For just a general midfielder, it's still like a very big amount of pressure. But yeah, no, as I said, he is fantastic. Like, you can't really have all the pieces. Like, you can't just have a team of Nick Dacos in the middle. You know what I mean?
As much as a lot of people would
that's
like
why
that.
players like Crisp. Yeah. Oh, I would hate to see it because 5% selection Dacos just goes to the Magpies every single time.
Yeah,
I don't want to draft with just Nick Dacos.
I do agree on that.
You know what I mean? It's like if you were going to pick a player to play like every position, Dacos probably would be up there.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But again, back on Chris because we're talking about him.
He is. Yeah. He is really, really fun to watch and definitely one of
great
those
on link up,
key players.
Great attacking player. Kicks a goal every now and again.
Yeah, he's more of a defensive midfielder. So it's not too he's offensive in terms of his tackling pressure, but he's defensive in terms of.
But he doesn't leak it the other way. He runs hard.
Yeah, exactly right. Speaking of defensive, Jeremy Howe, love him.
Oh, yeah.
14 touches, 71.4% efficiency, 8 marks, 4 score involvements, 7 1%ers, a stat that we don't really talk about all that often, but I thought it was really, really strong to note from him because that's one of the key points that he's always been really strong at is 1%ers. He's always great as a one-on-one player.
Yeah.
And a 1-1 scoreline for him. But yeah,
exactly.
He knows...
obviously spoils like one of the biggest 1%er gets for most teams.
Yeah, exactly.
So if you get high intercepts and a lot of 1%ers, it probably means you've had some dominant one-on-one performance.
And I think Jeremy Howe is definitely one of the better players in terms of playing one-on-one.
Yeah. But not only that, swung forward late as well.
Yeah, exactly.
I think he kicked a goal and a pretty good goal assist, wasn't it, as well?
Yes, he did get a goal assist.
I think it was the snap to Bobby Hill.
Off the top of my head. The one thing I do like about how Fly uses this team is that he knows the strengths of all of his players. And granted, Premiership last year does help that.
Mm-hmm.
But he knows when to swing a player forward. He knows when to pull him back.
Yeah, exactly.
Our boy is very, very good for that. He's a swingman. Jeremy Howe is also pretty much a swingman at this point. Like, they've got quite a few really strong players that can play both ends.
Yeah. And of course, when you're in a position where games aren't going your way, you sort of need that. And, it's a pretty big reason why they're able to come back.
Yeah, exactly.
Not just the obvious avenues. But I'm sure you'll probably talk about soon, but
like
everyone knows.
the 2023 Norm Smith medalist Bobby Hill.
Yeah, exactly.
He kicked.
Honestly, like, everyone will say Dacos, but I reckon it's a pretty good toss-up of, who you give the best player to. Because Bobby Hill was fantastic all game.
Bobby
you know
Hill's
what I mean?
always usually fantastic. It's very rare that he gets fully shot down.
Exactly.
And then, he kicked 5 goals from 10 touches, 7 marks, 3 inside 50s, 13 pressure acts. Again, he's playing predominantly forward, so it's usually on, that's forward defensive pressure, and 8 score involvements.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah.
It's brilliant scores. Brilliant. To pump up North Melbourne a little bit, granted, that last quarter of footy, not very pretty, but for the other 3 quarters, I thought they had some really strong players, especially their young players. Granted, majority of them are young players, but like Luke Davies-Uniacke, I thought he was probably one of the best games he's ever had, I'll be honest.
Yeah, exactly.
Finished with 31 touches, 61.3% efficiency, so not great in terms of efficiency, but he had 16 contested possessions, 8 inside 50s,
that
7
sort
clearances.
Of Wayne.
That does weigh hard on that last quarter. It's not very pretty.
When he got the hard tag from McCreary, I think it was.
It was probably McCreary.
He got a bit shut down, hard to possess, but overall, still fantastic.
Yeah, if you look at his efficiency prior to that 4th quarter, it's so much better. He just got shut down really hard in that last. But anyway,
it's a kid, hard to adjust.
Yeah, exactly. 7 clearances, 10 score involvements, 23 pressure acts, and 5 tackles. That's like absolute monster numbers. It's insane. George Wardlaw, the Warlord. I'm also a big fan of watching him play. I've been a big fan of him since last year. 30 touches, 70% efficiency, 10 contested possessions, 6 marks, 6 inside 50, 6 clearances. The 666 number, very dangerous. 3 goal assists, 10 score involvements, 18 pressure acts, and a goal on his own. He's normally the primary midfielder, the primary young midfielder they go to, who can push forward. Whereas you look at someone like Sheasel, he's a halfback to push midfield.
Yeah, but he's playing more midfield this year, but it's still like a flex position for Shees. Just under 50% centre bounce attendance. So, as I said, just where it's needed.
To Clarko's credit, I do really like what he's doing with Wardlaw and Sheasel. It's just about figuring out the rest of the pieces around them. Like, their ruck, Zeri, I do really like watching. I don't actually have his numbers listed here, but I thought he also had a really good game.
30 hitouts, 2 goals, 11 contested possessions, 4 clearances.
See, stats don't lie.
Yeah. No, it was very good.
Yeah, and it's like these are the sorts of games. Granted, 4th quarter heartbreaks. It's hard, especially for a young team. But that's something you got to learn, and like you got to show off how strong you can be in those 3 quarters. But that learning experience in the 4th is definitely something to primarily focus on.
And look, as I said, it's sort of one of those things where, there's a couple of things like. Obviously, the biggest thing was made with Will Phillips. He was a late replacement for Jason Kimms. Tagged Nick Dacos for the entire game up to 3/4 time. And his possession was limited. He still got the ball, but wasn't doing as much.
Yep.
Like Dacos, again, like Davies-Uniacke, his final accuracy was 65%. A lot of that was probably weighted towards the first 3 quarters.
Yeah.
When he was getting heavily tagged. And, he gets subbed off for Jaden Stevenson, of all people. Like,
what a weird sub to have against Collingwood.
Well, we're talking about, like, the use of subs. North, I don't want to knock Stevenson, because I actually thought he tried hard. Like, it was still ineffective, but he tried to get involved in the game. But North just aren't that great on the outside.
No, they're not.
So when you're in a position to win, and you're taking a really solid inside effort to where you're dominating the entire game, and somehow that even without the tag, like it just didn't, like maybe you take one of the weaker outside players off, or maybe even Tom Powell, who didn't really have much of an impact, young player in the center, maybe it was a management thing. We'll never know, but it was one of the two things that I think like really hurt North Melbourne. The other being, I just don't think they play a game plan viable for them to win games.
Yeah.
And that's not just their defense. I think I don't want to say they run too hard, but they definitely fade out late, and they really can't keep up that midfield pressure for entire games still.
Yeah.
And when you lose a game like this, I know North are impressive, but you gotta remember the flip side where these players are going to be hurting after this loss.
Absolutely.
Because you go out there, you feel like you played amazingly, and yet you get so far ahead, and to get mowed down like that, like it's like the opposite of Sydney. It's like in any position you feel like you could lose, and I think that actually goes back to Clarko. I think, and also like the last 5 years of North Melbourne just generally being terrible.
Yeah, it's kind of just an old history sort of thing.
Yeah, but I think really, as I said, to have North come in week out, like they almost get that mindset. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Like when you fade out so much in later halves, like it's not like the players aren't trying, but you know what I mean? It's just when you don't have as many close games, you're not as used to running out games. You know what I mean? Like when you have a blowout, like you're not going to play as hard on the fourth quarter.
Mm-hmm.
It's just you can't. But if you have like close games like Collingwood's, you're used to running. Like you build that tank.
Yeah, absolutely.
And in season, like you just get better and better from it. And North just don't seem to have that. Obviously it took so much to go wrong. A few controversial umpiring decisions.
Yeah.
To
sometimes
AFL again has come out, and said that the very last one, it wasn't the only one. The failed 50-meter penalty was a mistake. But yeah, as I said, it's sort of hard because it's heartbreaking.
But like that shouldn't ever really be like it shouldn't. I know we've already had multiple issues of this already throughout the season.
Yeah,
but fundamentally, it should not be about the last free kick that could have been. Like you were 54 points in front.
Yeah,
you just can't let that happen.
Yeah, and and you see in the players like one of the biggest moments, and it'll probably use saw it. Unfortunately, a bit of a semi-whippy people. Aiden Core in that last before the half,
mm-hmm.
Trying way too hard to like not concede anything, ends up turning the ball over by trying too hard to hold on to it. Leaks a goal. And it's just that sort of mindset, you know what I mean? Like the players
if I
just
didn't
aren't
do that, maybe
used.
we would have won, that sort of thing. It just gets into your head.
Not so much. It's just like the players aren't quite used to knowing what to do while holding a lead.
Yeah.
And it just adds up. And it happened in a massive way against Collingwood. It'll be one of the most, I won't say embarrassing defeats, but you know what I mean? Like,
well, I'm going to
it's just one of those games.
Interesting statistics in a moment, but go on.
Yeah. No. As I said, it was just like, it'll be one of those games that, will just, in this period of time, I don't think, even though the effort was there, history will look too favourable on it. You know what I mean? It's just another one of the low period for them.
Yeah, no, I agree. Another bright spark for North Melbourne, there is Nick Larkey, the Suv. He just did everything that he could in the forward line. He did the best that he can. Kicked 4 goals from 13 touches, 100% efficiency, by the way.
Yeah.
5 contested possessions, 7 marks. I believe all 7 of those marks were inside 50, if not at least majority of them were.
Yeah.
7 score involvements and 96% time on ground. So, like, at least at least they have someone they can kick to who is accurate.
Yeah, exactly. As they sort of build around that, they're obviously based on a lot of small pressure, but to have that pin post that's fairly,
Well,
what do you call it?
that's kind of always
Unreliable.
been Clarko's trademark is small forward pressure.
Yeah, but you have to have something to build around, and Larky
Lucky's
is just
perfect
that
for it.
person.
Yeah, it's like it's like the kind of structure that West Coast are trying to put up with Waterman at the moment, with Oscar Allen still out.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. Oh, yeah. While Alan's out, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. Once
Like, I
once
wouldn't
they're
say
both
long
back
term,
in,
but
that could change completely.
yeah, exactly. No, I know what you mean though. Like right now, they're just trying to make the most out of it with just Waterman, and that requires a lot of forward pressure. So
Yeah.
I agree with you.
Injury wise, apparently Jeremy Howe did something to his nose. I don't know how bad that was, but
I smashed it. I'm pretty sure. Like,
I don't think it's his
yeah.
first nose break, as far as I'm aware. He's
No.
had some pretty interesting injuries over the years. But the
Yeah,
final,
wasn't it walking the dog?
something like that,
Is
yeah.
that? Yeah.
But the final statistic and the most interesting statistic, probably from the weekend, apart from the audience attendance, not audience attendance, no, technically
Yeah.
audience attendance from
The Richmond
game,
Dusty
was the Collingwood's comeback from this game has become the 8th biggest comeback in VFL AFL history, beating out the miracle on grass between Brisbane and Geelong in 2013. It's such an interesting thing to look at, and I do have the full list, so I'm going to quickly run through here before we move on. So, the current biggest comeback win in VFL AFL history is between Essendon and North Melbourne, speaking of, round 16, 2001, by a 69-point deficit at three-quarter time.
Yep.
It's...
And I don't think that'll ever happen.
No, I don't think a lead that big will ever happen ever again.
Yeah.
But...
And I know I'm showing my age here, but I remember... Because in AFL Live 2004, they had historic moments to try and replicate, like in your shoes. And I think that was the one that everyone sort of played, like doing that comeback in the last. Yeah, it's
a fair enough point. I mean, it's technically a modern era sort of game as well, because it's post 2000.
Yeah, it's that blend, really. Like, when this game was starting to become professional, and skills were increasing, yeah,
and it definitely showed like the strength of some of the more, what's the word I'm kind of looking for? More progressive of teams trying to adapt into a new modern game style.
Yeah, and even the superstars, like obviously that James Hird, like that style of player.
Yeah, we were talking to Iblis the other day, kind of about it.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the second game on that list is Hawthorn St Kilda, round 12, 1999, 63-point deficit. Collingwood v St Kilda, round 10, 1970, 60-point deficit. Quite a few of these games are in the 90s, like the 70s, 80s, 90s sort of bracket. Number 4 is Hawthorn v Geelong, round 6, 1989, 56-point deficit. Number 5 is St Kilda v Western Bulldogs, round 6, 2015. 55-point deficit. More recent game.
I vaguely remember that. I think that was when Jack Steele... Oh, not Steele. Who's the other one? Jack Stephen kicked the winner.
No, actually, that sounds kind of correct.
Yeah.
St Kilda v Hawthorn, round 2, 1937. 55-point deficit. Another somewhat more recent. I say somewhat more recent. This is nearly 20 years old. West Coast v Geelong, round 10, 2006. 54-point deficit.
Yeah, that was... I think Geelong were in the doldrums during that year, starting where they were looking for a new coach who would eventually be Bomber Thompson.
Yep. Which would then lead into...
Yeah, it was just out of nowhere, flogging West Coast. West Coast came back. Sort of like this game, actually.
Well, speaking of, and then Collingwood North, round 14, 2024, 54-point deficit. Then the Miracle on Grass between Brisbane and Geelong, round 13, 2013, 52-point deficit. Again, this was the period of time when Brisbane had started to become not good at all. They were one of the worst teams.
Yeah, they were pretty trash. I think they were the worst defensive team of history. Well, up amongst them.
Yeah.
that
And this
year.
is where Geelong was still in their peak period. Like, they last won their premiership in 2011. Like, they were still insanely strong. They were playing finals every year, as they still continued to do up until recently.
Yeah.
So, and then the last one goes all the way back to before the Doggies changed their name. It's Footscray versus Essendon, round 5, 1978, 52-point deficit. So those are the current standing for the biggest comeback wins in VFL AFL history.
Yeah. And again, so much harder to do when, like,
When the games evolved
you
so
don't have
much.
those big forwards, dominating. Like,
Yeah.
all it took was someone dominating their one-on-one matchup.
Yeah, like you don't have, your Jonathan Browns. You don't have your, I don't know why he was the first one that came to me.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, Jason Dunstall, hell, even Billy Brownless, Plugger.
There we go. That's a big one.
Yeah. Those types of players are just feasted on bad matchups.
I only mentioned Jonathan Brown because I was looking at Brisbane, and it's like, he played.
Yeah, I would say
he played in 1, 2, 3.
I would say he's the last player of that sort of style. Like, it was really good he played in the era he did. To get
I'd say
success.
that, and then like early Matthew Richardson is that sort of era.
Yeah, even Matt Richardson was probably a bit too athletic to be counted, but still obviously a great player.
Yeah, of course.
But definitely a lot more pure forward focus.
Yeah, for sure. All right, you've got the last game, which happens to be your game.
Yeah. So we go from exciting to a bit of a Sunday sleep session going on, as Port frustrated their fans, me being one of them, with a fairly one-dimensional attack, and GWS failed to make their numerous back half chains that entered inside 50 convert, as both teams would clamp down on their opponents, force them wide, and in general just end up with a lot of behinds and not much good. So, the final score was 9-19, 73 for GWS to 6-15, 51 from Port. Was a very ugly arm wrestle. Both teams would have a goalless quarter, GWS being the first quarter, Port in the second.
Mm-hmm.
And in the last quarter, Port missed a few of the rare easy shots that they were allowed to have and would let GWS run away with it as they try to get a bit too aggressive to win the game, having it sealed with an impressive Kelly goal, wrapping up the game. I thought he was, one of the more influential players of the night, and, deserved that late goal. But yeah, there's really not too much to talk about because I don't think really either team had the setup they particularly wanted in this game. So it just sort of ended up in an ugly little tussle. So yeah, standouts. The biggest one, Dan Houston, probably All-Australian form, best Port Adelaide player by far this entire year. 35 disposals, 85% efficiency, 800 odd meters gained. It was like 795. 6 score involvements with 3 direct goal assists and 7 inside 50s. It was like the perfect blend of rebound and attack, which Port do have a lot of, but as I said before, it tends to be a bit biased towards rebounding and not enough against pure defense. But Houston still gets enough intercepts to, for me not to question his spot at all. Honestly, I don't know what our team would be without him. Josh Kelly, a bit of an old joke here, but I called him Jim Kelly because he was playing a bit of a quarterback role for GWS. Really influential and distributing. Best midfielder of the night. 9 score involvements and a goal to go with his 27 possessions and 640 meters per zone. What's his name? Daniels up forward.
Yeah, Brent Daniels.
Worked really hard. Brett Daniels, thank you. Led score involvements with 11, 10 contested possessions, 7 ground ball gets. Worked really hard from his 18 disposals and 1 goal 1. Hogan was the best presenting tall forward for the night, 6 marks inside 50. Kicked 1 goal 3 and was the worst accuracy offender, with Toby Green being 1 goal 5. I thought of all the players, I thought that both of those actually missed more of the gettable shots for the night. Green was a bit wider, but still, a bit unlike him.
Wasn't Toby
And it was
Green
really
chasing like a milestone sort of goal tally? Wasn't it like 500 goals or something like that? I'm gonna quickly have a look.
I mean, he might have been. I honestly, it just might have been not happening this match that wasn't ever brought up. Because yeah, as I said, it was just very inaccurate. I'm moving on to more positive for GWS. Briggs gave Soldo a buff. I thought Soldo was very in this match. But Briggs led the clearances with 9, winning the hitouts comfortably and being a lot better at the ground. GWS backline, Taylor and Lakalia stood really tall, prevented Port from getting a lot of the easy entries. Taylor getting 12 intercept marks and a game high 8 ground ball gets. And Lakalia just shut down Ollie Lord, who struggled to make much impact on return. Mitch Georgiadis for Port, kick 3 goals 1, most threatening forward, as Marshall wasn't providing, with 1 goal free and a dismal 12.5 disposal efficiency from 8 possessions. And, rounding up the positive support, Brandon Zerk-Thatcher, Jace Burgoyne, Kane Farrell all put solid efforts in. I thought they generally, despite being a bit hit or miss, had the right idea most of the night, which I couldn't really say too much about that for many a Port player.
Okay.
As
sorry to cut in, but
yeah,
it wasn't 500 goals.
No.
He was looking for 350. He's currently on 349.
Yeah, okay, sorry. Definitely missed a chance, but honestly, I think the commentary just assumed that goals weren't going to be kicked because that was mentioned once. No. Yeah, it was, and as by the tone of this, rundown, I think this game was a lot worse for Port Adelaide. Like, I'm not at, burn the house down, this is a disaster, but this game was appalling, really. I talked about last week how much attack was generated in the middle of the ground and how that's a bit of a vulnerability for them, considering that GWS shut it down. Absolutely nothing got going.
Yep.
And just Port's attacking ethos in general from halfback is just way too predictable going direct. GWS quite clearly shut it down from the get-go. Like, they were creating a lot of turnovers from it. And the thing that really baffles me is that when you got a team that takes so many risks going in the center, the outcome that you want from that is, nice looking shots on goal, a lot in the middle, open up a lot of forward lanes to get some nice marks inside 50. And what do Port do? They just get the, crappy wide kicks or, very high on the arc of the 50. A lot of shots from, the 45 to 50 plus meter range. And it's just so hard to justify for them because, they get the most inside 50s in the league, but they're trash. And it's not even a press like some Port teams were able to do. It's just, it's one of those things where they're able to come out really easily because they give it away in such damaging positions.
Yeah.
They don't run hard enough back, especially in the midfield. I think the lack of back running just led the defense to become exhausted. Honestly, while obviously I don't think the backs had a terrific day. Aaliyah definitely had some moments where he let a few players go. Asava, I don't think he was that bad, but obviously he created the first goal from GWS from a pretty shocking turnover.
Yeah,
he does that.
It wasn't a pretty look.
When you're scoring so crap, you sort of can't afford to let, when you're relying so much on that defense, it's sort of hard when, Asava's technically going to give up a goal every game just for something.
Yeah.
I still think it's an overall net positive, mind you. But you know what I mean? It's just sort of sums up Port. He did get a goal himself back late, so I felt good that he was able to do that. But as I said, I thought that Zerk-Thatcher was by far the best, but you actually saw at the end of the game he was exhausted.
Yeah, he was doing just from having so a run back.
Yeah. And, as I said, it was just so easy for GWS, especially in the back half, to get that running transition play. You know, as I said, a lot of them broke inside 50. If it wasn't for Port's defense and you were at least trying to make those shots hard, this would have been an absolute blowout.
Yeah.
So I don't really get some of the commentary about Port's defense at the moment. Like, it's still got issues, but it's not the biggest problem. I actually think it's a lot more forward of the ball. It's just, you know, Port gets stats that sort of inflate when they get weaker teams because, you know, when you got a few more central options, you know, a bit less defensive teams, Port can get those one or two central options in leading. But yeah, right now it's just not a wide enough attack from their tall forwards. They dropped Dixon and Finlayson for this game. And honestly, it was like, well, maybe they're trying a small forward option, but they still focused a lot on Marshall and Georgiadis. They don't have Willie Rioli, who's been sweeping up for them in the forward line.
Yeah,
he's a
great small pressure player.
Oh yeah, we've sorely been missing him. But and then they swing a Savaretta-Gilliam forward late for, you know, I mean, he tried hard, like, you know, in that, but it was just so weird. It's just like a lack of commitment to attacking football. You know what I mean? It's just, it's just fun.
Doesn't make any sense, honestly.
Yeah, it really doesn't. Like, Port's attacking. I've witnessed some terrible attacks of Port in the Hinckley era. And I will say, like, this is one of the more frustrating, because unlike the era where we had, like, Robbie Gray propping up everything, basically, like, was before Dixon, Schultz had just retired or was, like, starting to go a bit bad. You know, we had, like, Jake Need, Young, even Kane Mitchell in the forward line, Jarman Impey, you know, just a lot of ineffective forwards. And you can understand, you know, why we weren't scoring as much. But to not have that evolution as players, as the quality of players has gotten better. And I know Georgiadis and Marshall are very up and down, but you know what I mean? It's just like, you know, when you got the ability for Zach Butters to go forward, Connor Rosie, Darcy Byrne-Jones is turning into an impacting player up forward, even though he scored 1 goal too. I like the way he presents.
Yeah, he absolutely gave Port a lot of opportunities.
Yeah, Jed McEntee, you know, wasn't a brilliant game by him, but did a lot of things right. Very effective and, you know, a bit of pressure. But you know what I mean? Like, none of that converts into forward entries. And what I was talking about before, Jace Burgoyne on the wing, you know, he was trying his hardest. He was getting, like, inside 50s and all that, but it wasn't to any effect. And, yeah, as I said, I won't rant too much because I could spend the next 20 minutes on this.
Oh, but, yeah, I'm sure you can.
You know, I think this just highlighted the worst of Port Adelaide's offensive performances at the moment, you know, because they had enough of the ball to play well.
Yep.
They weren't dominate in any particular areas, except maybe the hitouts. But yeah, as I said, it was just a lot for nothing. And we can't just rely on someone like Horn Francis or Zach Butters to bail us out every game. You know, Zach Butters gets a lot of attention. You know, Connor Rosie's still finding his feet coming back. But yeah, it's pretty dismal. Yeah, I think that's really all I want to talk about. I mean, there was other good players from the Giants, I should say. Connor Ryden played fantastically.
Yep.
Toby Bedford as well.
I was going to mention Bedford, actually, because it was his 50th game, and I thought he actually really stood up after being really quiet past couple of weeks.
Yeah, and honestly, I don't think I've ever seen him play in the middle before, let alone, like, as a tagger.
He's often been, like, a pressure mid-forward. Like, normally he's just a runner.
Exactly. Like I would expect him to maybe, like, go on, you know, Tom Stewart, for example. Not so much in the midfield, so very impressive.
Yeah, I agree.
Had a bit of impact as well. You know, it wasn't just his lockdown, it was his ability to get a bit of ball himself, made it a bit more rounded. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Yeah, I think it's just a game that both teams want to forget, but at least GWS had the general idea of their game plan in motion. Yeah, as I said, they're just mired by a bit of inefficiency at the moment. If they can get out of this slump, I think they can go forward, challenge for top 4. If not, I think they're just going to be very hit or miss against the top teams. And yeah, as I said, for Port, it's pretty much the same thing. They really have to match up well defensive on the offensive matchup to make me favour them against any good teams.
Yeah, no.
That's about all
I
have to say about that.
I agree with that. Before we just quickly end this part about the past round, I want to briefly go back to both the Collingwood game and the Hawthorn game, actually, because I want to just give a shout out to Collingwood debutant Chu Dieth, the brother of CJ at Collingwood. I thought they both had really incredible games. Well, it was CJ's 50th game at Hawthorn. Against us. So, a bit overshadowed by Dusty's 300th compared to 50 games.
Yeah.
But he had a brilliant performance against us. And what I saw of Chu in the North Melbourne Collingwood game, I thought he had a good standout performance as well for a debutant. So,
yeah,
it
was just like
little family shout out there.
Yeah, he went better as the game went on. A few good defensive efforts. Yeah.
Okay. MRO reports. Nothing from the actual round itself, but last week in the VFL, Sam Wiedemann from Essendon, 3-match ban in the VFL. I believe it was a dangerous tackle. I can't actually remember what it was. It might have been a hard hit, something like that. They are contesting it. However, the contest doesn't happen until this week because Essendon had the bye. I don't know why that's why it works, but for some reason it does. It's a weird system.
Yeah.
I don't get it. Why not just deal with it then and there? It's weird.
Man, the AFL's system for tribunals and all that, it's all bad enough as it is. I can't follow in the lower grade. I just take it as it is.
It's pretty much the exact same system. It's all kind of graded the same way, but it's just it's stupid. So yeah, the Essendon dealing with that. Only fines from the rest of the week, which is good. Even though I think Dan Butler getting reported for tripping should have been a week because it was absolutely on purpose.
Yeah, that was the old Dusty Fletcher rule.
You literally see him reaching down to grab the foot. Like, what more are you gonna do?
Well, I think the thing is like Dusty Fletcher, for a while, he was deliberately doing ankle tags. It happened week in, week out, and they were like, no, we're going to give you a week for it if you do it. And that's sort of eased up now that not as many players do it. So maybe they're just like, well, unless it comes back up again, we'll just fine them. But
yeah, I don't know. We'll see.
In terms of ability to cause injuries, it's something that you really don't want to encourage players doing.
No, absolutely
not. That's how you get knee injuries, you know what I mean? And that sucks.
Especially when you're running that fast. It's not a good look at all.
No.
The last thing I want to talk about before we move on is the Rising Star. So last week, the Rising Star went to Luke Nankervis of Adelaide. He did have a really good performance against Richmond, so credit to him. But this week, it goes to GWS's Harvey Thomas. There we go, right side. Who, not a player that you kind of really look at when you look at how strong their team is, but he's a Giants Academy product. He was picked at pick 59 from last year's draft. He finished with 15 touches, 5 tackles, and a goal. And, he's averaging some decent stats across the 13 games he's played so far. And, credit to him. He's the first Rising Star nominee for the Giants this season.
Yeah, and obviously I watched that game. I do remember him now. He's like a fairly blonde sort of looking chap, isn't he?
No, he's more brunette. He might be blonde now, but
I think he might have dyed it. But yeah, no, he provided a bit of good distribution in that game. Like, I think it's just one of those things where nothing ended up converting, so it didn't look as impressive, but he's definitely involved in a fair bit of play. So congratulations to him.
Credit to him. All right, let's move on to the overall season ladder, as we do at the end of every round. Not really much changes, I'll be honest. First and second are still Sydney and Collingwood. Not Collingwood, Carlton. Collingwood's jumped to third
Yep.
place. Essendon has dropped down to fourth. The bye, that has a habit
Yeah.
of messing with the ladder. GWS jumped to fifth, which means therefore Geelong, Port, and Freo all drop to 6th, 7th, and 8th respectively. The Doggies jump up to 9th. They are half a game outside of the top 8. So are GWS, Melbourne, and Hawthorn, all on 28 points. And our 10th,
you
11th.
said GWS.
Sorry, I mean Gold Coast,
Gold Coast.
Melbourne, and Hawthorn, all on 28 points at 10th, 11th, and 12th respectively. Hawthorn being this close to the 8 is really, really insane.
Crazy.
And honestly, it would be really funny if they do manage to make finals at the end of the season.
Yeah, I'm gonna look at their back half, but
I haven't had a look. They
bad.
do have West Coast after the bye, which could go either way. I'll be honest, because West Coast just had the bye, so they'll have a game to freshen up.
Well, they got West Coast twice as well.
Well, there you go. But yeah, from 12th to 18th, it doesn't change. It's still Hawthorn, Brisbane, St Kilda, Adelaide, West Coast, Richmond, and North Melbourne. I'm actually kind of grateful that North didn't win by 54 points, although the number 1 draft pick is, always looking spicy.
It's I don't know. I think if they got Richmond will be happy with the number 1 pick, but I think they're, it wouldn't be that bad for them. But at the same time, they're doing enough right to where they don't need it.
Yeah, no, I think North Melbourne are finally at a decent point. They just need to continue building around their key players.
So, you mean North
Richmond.
Melbourne need number 1.
Oh yeah, no.
No, Richmond don't need number 1.
We definitely need draft picks.
You want number 1, but you don't need it.
We definitely need draft picks, and if the end of season goes the way that I think it might go, we could get some fairly decent draft picks coming up. We shall see.
Okay, let me put it this way. North need to get the best key position player in the draft this year. That's just no question.
Whether that's key back, key forward, key midfielder, whatever.
Yeah.
They just need...
they just need the versatility and the space. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Is there anything else we want to say on these teams before we move on?
No, not really. I think it's... still the quagmire in the middle. Especially every team but Sydney have had some pretty putrid performances. Maybe not Carlton as much.
No, I think Carlton have definitely stepped up their game in recent times.
Yeah, they've been a lot more consistent. Everyone else has had at least one putrid performance of the season. But now, as I said, we're just looking at consistency and who will end up shaping up the 8. Hopefully it's your team, unless your team isn't Port.
Well, it's definitely not going to be my team. I can tell you that much.
Yeah, maybe not. Just a bit out of reach.
Before we move on to next round, I want to briefly touch on the Coleman medal because Joel Amartey definitely had an impact on how this is shaping up this week. So, top 5 are pretty interesting because 2 players are tied on 38, and that's Ben King and Charlie Curnow. 2 players are tied on 33 with Jake Waterman and Jesse Hogan. And then rounding out the top 5 because of his 9-goal haul is Joel Amartey at 31. And then just to briefly round out top 10, it's Harry Mackay at 29, Kyle Langford, Bailey Fritsch, and Nick Larkey at 28, and Tyson Stengel and Joe Danaher at 27. And
it was just sort of like...
Just to give a brief shout out to the West at Josh Tracy at 26 goals.
Oh, yeah. No, I do like Tracy, even if he did butcher the ball. Had one of the worst misses, set shot misses. If you want a quick laugh, look at that. But still love him because it's good. But yeah, as I said, it was just interesting with Amartey because, as I said, we've been saying all this time, Sydney have been doing it without that dominant tall forward.
They haven't needed it because they have so many really good contributors.
Yeah, exactly. And then he just pops up and is like, hey, I'm in
hey, I exist too. Let me do something.
Yeah, so, as I said, I like it because I think it's got the reward for effort and it's great to see him in the top 5 for the Common.
And this is definitely a much closer race now than it was like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Carlton obviously having the bye.
That definitely doesn't help. It helps the other teams. It doesn't help them.
Yeah, so as I said, it'll be interesting to see how it ends up after next week, but there's no reason to think it wouldn't still be close. we'll probably talk about the matchup soon, but Carlton have Geelong, who actually no, Geelong. I've said they're terribly defensively, so maybe Conroe will get
We'll
a
see.
billion goals. I don't know. We'll see.
Well, actually, no, that's last round. So, well, whilst we're on it, may as well go through it now. Carlton and Geelong, first game of the round, Friday night at the MCG.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're not wrong. Geelong are not very good defensively right now, and Carlton are really, really strong offensively. So
yeah,
I think it's probably going to be primarily a midfield battle. But as long as Carlton's midfielders can distribute effectively to their forward line, I think it's pretty much going to be a Carlton sweep.
Yeah, pretty much. It will provide a good wing matchup with some of the more in-form wingers in the comp, being Max Holmes, who has come back into the middle, so it depends where exactly he plays.
He might match up against Sam Walsh.
Yeah, he might. Or, as I said, if he takes the outside, Blake Acres, who's having a pretty great year. So, yeah, as I said, we'll see how sort of, like, there's a few permutations of how ball transition may come up in this game. Obviously, a lot more I see going in Carlton's favour. They'll have multiple avenues to set up if Geelong's defence doesn't win one-on-one matchups because they're up against two of the best one-on-one offensive matchup players in the league. So, good luck with that.
Yeah, have fun with that.
As I said, I'd just like to see Geelong do something to curb that influence.
And like you'd like to hope that Cameron and Hawkins can get involved, but they've had such an average season so far. It's kind of hard to really put too much hope in them.
Fantastic. I just think, as you've mentioned, he's sort of been playing in positions
where he's not.
He's had such a dominant forward start. One of the best distributors of the league.
And now they're pushing him
he's basically
forward.
a tall who has the passing sensibility of Graham Myers and Brad Close. But as I said, they've needed him a bit defensively. They've been a bit weird with him. It hasn't stifled Geelong's attack, but with the amount of points they're giving up, they sort of need him to fire.
It's certainly impacted their ability to be strong in the air, especially offensively.
Yeah, exactly. And as I said, it's required Stengel and Myers especially to really cut the, I won't say slack, but you know what I mean? Like, they need to score goals, otherwise, as I said, they just can't keep up. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Restriction is the name of the game for Geelong. Get some sort of restriction going. I don't think they'll win, but it'll at least make it a bit more palatable, maybe close.
Make it more of an interesting game if they're able to shut down Carlton's key distributors.
Yeah.
Right. Port Adelaide and the Brisbane Lions at Adelaide Oval, Saturday afternoon.
Don't listen to me because I'm going to tell you to tip Port. All sensibilities tell you to tip Brisbane. They're in great form.
They are.
And, as I said, their forward of the ball restriction. The forward of the ball dominance leading to restriction at the other end. Port, I've mentioned, being pretty poor defensively. That extends to the centre square where Brisbane like to attack. They'll need to be on watch. I will say for Port, in terms of they've got the tolls to mitigate some of Brisbane's defence. I think it might be a bit hard, especially since Brisbane's smaller forwards aren't quite firing at the moment. And in terms of defensively, Port should find avenues to score goals. It just depends, A, how accurate they are, and B, which forwards feel like firing. Obviously, we don't have Charlie Dixon. He's out for 3 weeks, getting suspended in the Sandful. I didn't mention that before, but I thought I'd just bring it up here.
It does. It is a very valid point because it means you only have a handful of viable players, including Finlayson to maybe come back in. But
it's like that toss-up. Do we play Law? Do we play Finlayson? Or do we not play either? Which is, an option. I don't think we get Willie Rioli back, but I think he's coming soon. So check the team scales for that. I don't know if you have any opinions, but I think
I'm definitely more favourable to the Lions. Just going off. I don't know if it
I think
in Adelaide will matter, but
form's well in the Lions' favour. I do think matchup wise, Port actually are okay. It's just that I don't think Port are exactly in form at the moment.
Mhm.
They're just sort of sputtering along. So it'll take a bit of a turnaround for them to win, but I'll tip them. So,
Yeah.
I mean, you might want to join me if you want to try and shark a tip. I
We'll
wouldn't recommend it.
No, I think I'm probably going to lean Brisbane. We'll see.
Yeah.
All right. Probably the most interesting game of the round. Battle for the Bridge has returned.
Exactly.
Except this time it's hosted
Sydney,
by the Giants at NG Stadium.
yes. Sydney 1-0 in this contest so far. The one was earlier. I think it was fairly convincingly Sydney by like 20 or 30.
Something like
I'm
that.
remembering correctly. Yeah.
I think they kicked away in the fourth. I think that's what got them.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I mean, as we see, Sydney are just so good in the back half. I will say, though, GWS, their defense is looking to click a bit more. So it'll be interesting to see if they shut down, again, if they can restrict some of the forward options. Again, it will be a matter of like how the midfield matchup fares. GWS is probably one of the few teams that have an okay midfield matchup against Sydney.
Mm-hmm.
I think Briggs is probably one of the most important players for GWS. If he can go well against Grundy, I think that might help.
I agree.
The
midfield matchup
is
definitely going to be one of my favorites to watch because you've got Gordon, you've got Heaney, you've got Adams, and you've got like Tom Green, Lockie Whitfield, and other players. Toby Green might play more midfield time rather than forward time. Josh Kelly.
Yeah.
Toby Bedford. It's going to be a really fun matchup.
Exactly. Finn Callanan as well. He's been playing. Inserting himself into a midfield threat. As I said, it's one of those ones where, like, as I said, like, obviously Sydney have the more star power, but I think GWS has defensively done okay enough in that area. I don't think they're that terrible at concessions through that. I think it's just limiting the turnovers, not getting scored against so easily, especially as the game goes on. As I said, if they turn over the ball late, I don't think Sydney will allow them the same graces as Port did, especially in the forward line, mucking around. So it'll require GWS being on their best behaviour, but Sydney are just next level. I'm going to tip them and just cop the one random freak loss they might have for the rest of the year.
Yeah, I'm probably going to go Sydney as well. I do like the Giants. I'm quite a big Orange Tsunami fan this season. I think they've looked really good for the most part. I would love to actually see them
patch in the middle.
Yeah,
I'd love
to see them have final success. But again, Sydney are just too good at the moment. It's
I will say again, maybe like the Port Brisbane, if you're looking to like fluke a tip that you think no one else will, you could consider it. But again, not recommended.
No.
It's just if your tipping season's starting to flounder like mine's is, you might.
All right, moving on. Saturday night at the MCG, Melbourne hosting North Melbourne. I would say this is a pretty convincing tip to just go straight to Melbourne. They're coming off of a bye. Like, they're very fresh. They might actually have Jake Lever back. I haven't checked that, but if they do, their defensive structure is going to be so much better than what it has been the past couple of weeks.
Yeah. I think the interesting thing is midfield, because Melbourne's midfield's been pretty bad the last month.
And they did just lose Petrarca, who's been their best contributor to their midfield.
So at least, North might be like, wow, we did so well in the midfield. Let's see if we can back it up, make a few adjustments, hopefully maintain a bit of four-quarter consistency. But, yeah, it's also, I could just see North Melbourne getting thrashed, being disheartened from last week. It's hard to tell with bottom four teams, but you're still going to tip Melbourne almost every day of the week.
Yeah, absolutely. You like to hope that North Melbourne can cause an upset, but you're just going to tip Melbourne because it's the expected win.
Melbourne will probably appreciate North's defense, trying to get their forwards into the game as well. So, yeah.
All right. Sunday afternoon off to Marvel Stadium, where Essendon hosts the West Coast Eagles.
Yep.
West Coast coming off of a bye. Essendon also coming off of a bye. Both teams honestly, I would say this is a coin flip game, but again, going off of form recently, Essendon do look better. Granted, they had,
Oh yeah, West Coast the last couple of games have been pretty trashed here.
and whilst Essendon have had some like close losses and like haven't really looked the greatest, you gotta kind of back
they've
them in on
normally done
this.
the job.
Yeah.
Yeah. Although West Coast weirdly gives them trouble. Like, especially in the early game where they weren't that far away. Granted, it was at Optus to losing, and that was before West Coast. Actually, no, they had the win against Freo the week before.
Yeah,
I
they
thought
had the
that was
Derby
after,
win, and then
but-
they lost to Essendon, and then they beat us.
Yeah, okay.
No, that was after. Anyway, go on.
Yeah. But yeah, as I said, so, again, I think defense probably an area of weakness. That as West Coast can try and pinpoint. I do think that their midfield, it's sort of a coin flip. I could see Essendon winning through the midfield because West Coast can be atrociously bad defensively from it. But at the same time, Eagles get the form going, get Harley Harlison Reid back.
Yes,
he's just finished his 2-game suspension.
I believe suspension is up, so good.
Yeah,
good to go.
You think he would just go straight back in?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I'd say Essendon. I don't think it's going to be that. I think it might be close. Like,
I hope it's close.
30.
Honestly, I do hope it's close.
Yeah, but it'll be interesting if West Coast can get a bit of form back, especially after the bye, reset their footing, and let the media just think it's all Harley Reid. 2 games missing, play shockingly, maybe beat Essendon, gets the back page for 10 more weeks.
Yeah, that sounds like out west. Well, speaking of out west, that's the last game of the round where Freo hosts the Gold Coast Suns at Optus.
Yeah,
Freo, the Suns coming off of a bye. Freo coming off of a interesting game.
Yeah, pretty bad.
They had some bright spots, and it's something they can still build from and learn from.
Look, as I said, I will say
they were also playing.
It's the only shocking game defensively they've had, so I'm not sure if it'll repeat. But Gold Coast, I think they're not really that suited for Freo. I think they're both like sort of like that uncontested game going.
Yeah,
like,
I think it's going to be another weird clash of game styles, like it was between Essendon and Gold Coast.
Yeah, like Freo had that sort of switch.
Sorry.
Yeah. Well, like Fremantle sort of had that switch to where they like hold out and then go, whereas Gold Coast they chip it around a bit, but they're more, they're looking more for that wing style look, and it's sort of not as calculated as Freo, but it can still be damaging.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I will say Gold Coast needs to win one of these away games. And I think Fremantle's like,
I thought
put the target on their back.
I thought it was going to be like 2 weeks ago, but no, apparently not.
Yeah. No, it was St Kilda, I think.
Yeah, it was the St Kilda game where they probably should have won.
I mean, look, I've tipped St Kilda that game, so I'm obviously going to tip Fremantle this game. But, as I said, if Fremantle's defense is still as bad as it was this week, no doubt Gold Coast are going to do pretty well.
The conditions out west are very similar to the conditions on the Gold Coast. So, granted, different stadium, different sizes.
Not as much humidity.
Match up against a different team, but the environment itself could actually have a factor because you come to Melbourne, it's too cold. But if you play in a similar environment, you might be able to put up a similar performance as you would at home.
And Gold Coast has done okay against West Coast in Optus Stadium. Weirdly enough, not as much translated against Freo, but I understand what you're saying with that.
Yeah.
I still tip Fremantle in this.
I'd probably still tip Freo as well, but you never know.
Yeah, exactly. It's not. I think it's like the most 60-40. Oh, apart from GD West and Sydney.
Yeah.
It's the most 60-40 game on here.
Yeah, the battle.
There's nothing that I would say was a true 50-50.
The battle for the Bridge Part 2 is definitely the more interesting game and probably the most exciting game out of the round. But Freo Gold Coast could be a very interesting matchup at the end of the day.
It could produce something unexpected.
Yeah. And then just to rattle off the buys of the round, it's Adelaide, Collingwood, the Western Bulldogs, Hawthorn, St Kilda, and Richmond. And after this round, every team has had their bye, and we'll be back to full 9-game rounds. So, I believe that will do us for this week. There was an AFL fan survey that was released today. Was that
Yeah,
today?
I believe it.
We might go over that next week. Just because I don't know. I feel like we need a little bit more information on what the whole point of this survey is. Like, what sort of things are they fishing for? Like, maybe I haven't actually had a look at the questions. I know Snap and some other
Yeah,
people
I might have a look at it, and we can just quickly bring it up next week.
So we'll have a look at that. But until then, thank you all so much for coming and hang out with us. We're looking forward to going through next week's rounds, even though my team isn't playing, so it's slightly less of a care, but it definitely gives me more time to look further into some of the teams that I haven't really had the best look into this season. Like, for example, like I haven't really looked at many of the Geelong games. Like, maybe I'll take a look at that, stuff like that. I believe that will do us overall. So again, thank you all so much. Be sure to go check out the socials down below. Check out my stream, especially. I stream every Tuesday. Granted, I know this goes up on Wednesday, so it doesn't help. But just as a reminder, and then sometimes I do surprise streams when I have free time over the weekends or later in the week. So be sure to drop me a follow down there or on my other socials if you want to see when I go live or do other stuff. And yeah, we will see you all next week for round 15 and episode 18 of the Coast to Coast AFL podcast. So until then, see you then.